My daughter snuck into my son's room without permission and killed his cat. My son Jake moved out at 18 and got his own place. First thing he did was get a cat. Our daughter Amy is allergic to them, so he wasn't allowed one when he lived with us. He gave us a key to his place, and was very firm about it being only for emergencies, if something should happen, God forbid. This Thursday he went to a wedding to another city, and his plan was to drive home as soon as it finishes, even if it means he drives at night. His place would be empty the entire day. Unbeknownst to us, Amy took the keys Jake left with us and went to his place with her friend. The reasoning behind this was that his place is in the city, close to the places they had plans to go to, whereas our house is more in the outskirts and further away from all the fun. So they wanted to go to Jake's place to get ready and pregame, because he wouldn't be home until very late at night or more likely early in the AM. While the cat was sleeping on the floor, they had drinks and accidentally stepped on it, and unalived it. In a panic, they just left the place. When Amy came home, she went straight to her room. Jake calls me at 5 AM extremely upset, and I piece together from the frantic rambling that his cat is dead. I even stupidly asked him if she was sick. He starts crying and goes into disgusting detail about how he came home to blood everywhere and his cat squished. At this point I have no clue about Amy sneaking in and using the place as a get-ready lounge. Obviously I'm upset and ask him about what happened and whatever, and he says he is going to ask his landlord for the security footage for the building. I try to console him the best I can and we end the call. At breakfast I tell my husband and Amy about it, and she visibly panics at the mention of the security footage and comes clean. She says she is really sorry. I'm in shock and don't know what to do. Call Jake and tell him, or wait for him to find out, or what? He calls again around 11 strangely calm, says Amy unalived his cat, but you already knew that, didn't you, and how she just couldn't let him have a pet even now, she just had to ruin it. I ask him to calm down, to come over to talk this over. Is he going to sue his damn sister? He starts absolutely screaming at me about how he knew I wouldn't make the golden child take responsibility. I tell him Amy has been inconsolable since it happened, and he tells me all she has to do is turn the waterworks on and she becomes the victim, and you let it happen every single time. He starts making threats again. Amy is now really sad and I'm trying to console her by telling her it was an accident.
Redditors who have nearly been murdered but talked your way out of it. What did you say to your would-be killer that saved your life? I am a motorcycle rider. Just over a year ago I purchased my Cena 20S, and at the time, it met all my expectations. Great sound quality for music, clear calls, and contact with my fellow riders. Little did I know that one day it would save my life. On February 28, 2016 around 9:30 p.m. I came home from a ride. I got off my bike in the driveway where I was met by a man with a gun who had broken into my home. He demanded I enter the house, and as I approached the door, threw my cell phone onto the ground. As I crossed the threshold I was forced to the ground and my hands and feet were bound with phone cord. The intruder resumed his vicious ransacking of my house while I lay there in my helmet wondering what was going to happen to me when he was done. Sometime later my roommate pulled up and parked his car in the garage. The intruder ran out the front door to confront him. I heard a scuffle outside for a few minutes, after which my roommate was forced into the house, bloodied, beaten, and then bound in a separate room for myself. The destruction of the house continued once again. He discovered the safe, pistol, and rifle cases, violently demanding the keys and combinations while kicking my roommate. He began speaking irrationally about how he was looking for child corn and assault rifles, how someone sent him to our house months earlier and he had been watching the house for a couple days. He was going to hold us for about 2 days while he cleaned up his fingerprints and burned parts of the house to get rid of any DNA. He would then drive us to the middle of nowhere and leave us for dead. While he was spending time into the back room attempting to break into the safe, I was able to break one of my hands free and turn my Cena on. The moment the Cena said phone connected I had a small glimmer of hope. The noise of the intruder breaking into the safe granted me an opportunity to access the voice command speed dial system on the Cena. Whispering quietly, I didn't necessarily care who it ended up calling, I just prayed for anyone to answer. My father, who is 3 hours ahead on the Eastern Time Zone, answered, and I repeatedly whispered 911, 911, 911. He eventually replied back to me 911, confirming he knew there was a problem. I then started repeatedly whispering my address, at which point the intruder came around the corner and yelled at me, "What's that noise?" I told him it's just the radio playing in the helmet and I can't turn it off. He proceeded to take a hammer to the side of my helmet while it was still on my head, destroying the Cena. He grabbed the remains and threw them in the toilet. He then started a fire in the fireplace to burn random items from around the house, including his own shoes, which he replaced with the shoes directly off my feet. My father eventually tried calling back, but when my cell phone rang, the intruder smashed it with the hammer and threw it in the fire as well. The police finally arrived and noticed the blood on ground from the scuffle and called for backup. The intruder became nervous. He unbound me and instructed me to answer the door and send the cops away. I agreed, stood up and approached the front door. The police were shouting, "Local police department, open the door," over and over again, and my roommate shouted back from the other room, "We are in here," repeatedly. The intruder ran to the other room to silence my roommate. I reached out and opened the door to 5 or 6 officers with weapons drawn. I ran out into the front yard yelling hostage with my hands up, hoping no one would shoot. As I was about to be restrained, behind me the intruder slammed the door. The police quickly withdrew back to the street. I was escorted by an officer as fast as possible to the street, barely able to keep my footing as we moved. Dragged through the front lawn and placed in the back of the squad car. I updated them on the situation inside the house and how to distinguish between my roommate and the intruder. The local SWAT team was called in to secure the house. After another 2 hours or so, my roommate was finally able to escape his bindings and make his way out of the house, beat up but safe. The intruder ended up escaping out the back door of the house somewhere in that 2-hour window of time. The entire ordeal lasted around 6 hours. The suspect has been found in jail from unrelated charges and was linked to the case with evidence found at my house. After a year of bullshitting the court system with an attempt at getting off on mental disorder and the state psych hospital saying he is fit to stand trial, he was sentenced to prison with 26 years plus. I asked my best friend to be my trip sitter and he traumatized me. I don't even know how to begin to recover from this event, and I feel like I'll have trouble trusting anyone again after this and calling someone a friend ever again. I have been best friends with Jeremy since we were in middle school, and we're both 18 now. We both have crappy home lives, as well as learning disabilities. Therefore we were both put in remedial classes during school, and we became fast friends when we realized we had a lot in common. We both acted out at every chance we got, and soon after we became friends, we had to be separated in our classroom since we would disturb the peace so often. All in all, I know I've been a bad kid, but I don't think I deserve something like this to happen to me. Jeremy has issues with mental health, and I'm pretty sure he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder when we were still kids. I've seen Jeremy spit on authority figures, vandalize public property, and even kick a dog before, but nothing as dark as what he did recently. A little while ago, we were talking about things we wanted to try before it was time for us to graduate high school, and Jeremy mentioned that I still hadn't tried any psychedelics. We had smoked WD together before and tried some pills here and there, but I've never personally tried psych since I'm on a few different antidepressants, and I worried about the chemicals mixing. On the other hand, Jeremy has done psychedelics multiple times, so I ended up agreeing. I really did want to experience more before I graduated. So Jeremy bought us 2 tabs of LSD, and we hung out under a bridge and put the tabs on our tongues. I remember the moment I put the tab in my mouth, I felt a random wave of anxiety as I looked into Jeremy's eyes and tasted the inky paper. I remember thinking there was something off in his eyes, but I just chalked it up to nerves. I regret not listening to my instinct, and I could have saved myself a world of trauma. If I just listened to myself and spit the tab out. We laid in the grass afterward and waited for the tabs to hit us. It happened pretty quickly. We had been lying there chatting for about 40 minutes when I realized I was feeling different. I looked up at the sky and saw it was full of kaleidoscope shapes. I remember feeling good at first and laughing at how bright and colorful everything looked around me. But then I started really looking around under the bridge. I saw a stray dog with 3 legs, a bunch of needles, and some homeless guys sleeping nearby, and the energy around me started making me uneasy. That's when I turned to Jeremy and asked if we could get out of there. When he looked at me, he still had a weird look in his eyes. At first he just stared at me and then said I was acting crazy. Then he started making this high-pitched laugh and asking me over and over if I wanted to leave. I kept begging him to get out of there with me, and I told him I was feeling weird and I needed a better environment. That's when he leaned in really close to me and started screaming and shaking me. His eyes were wild as he screamed at me if I really wanted to leave. I said yes one more time, and the next thing I knew, Jeremy had taken out his pocket knife and was pressing it to my cheek. I had never felt so terrified. He felt like some sort of demon that was sitting on my chest, and I genuinely felt like he was about to unalive me in that moment. I somehow pushed him off me and started running away. When I turned around, I saw Jeremy chasing after me with the knife held out in front of him, still laughing. I ran as fast as I could. Eventually, I found a porta potty near an empty construction site and threw the door open. I held my body against the door once I was inside. It was disgusting in there, I was hyperventilating, and it smelled like death. I barely had a moment to catch my breath before Jeremy started screaming from outside that I couldn't stay in there forever, and that he was going to get me one way or another. I started crying as he began kicking and shaking the porta potty. It felt like hours before he stopped. It was hell. I felt trapped in there, and I had never been so scared for my life. I saw the sun go down from inside the porta potty, and after I was sure a couple of hours had gone by, I tried the door only to realize Jeremy had jammed it from the outside. I truly was trapped in the porta potty. I began panicking once again and screaming for help. I think I ended up spending almost 10 hours imprisoned in that porta potty before a homeless guy heard me and let me out. I must have looked crazy to him. I literally hugged him since he was the only person to help me out of that situation. I went home and cried in the shower for what felt like forever. I felt so paranoid and scared. I wish I had never trusted Jeremy to end up in that situation with him, and I still don't understand what happened to him to make him do that to me. Who would do that to their best friend, and should I be scared of him hunting me down?
Thought he stood me up on our date, turns out he passed away. Literally what the title says. I'm in shock right now, I don't even know what to say really. We've been on 4 dates and instantly clicked and had so much in common and constantly talked, and he was just awesome. Did the dirty on our 3rd date and it was amazing as well. I really thought I had found a good one. And then right before our 5th date he went radio silent and promptly stood me up at the restaurant. Or so I thought. Oh well, he probably got something better to do, thank God it's only been like 3 weeks and I didn't get too invested, but I also really liked him and was kinda mad. 4 whole days of me delving into every insecurity I ever had trying to find a reason he would ghost me like this and embarrass me by standing me up. And then I met my friend, his coworker, who initially introduced him to me. I didn't want to seem unpleasant or anything, so I just told him to tell the guy I'm not mad that he stood me up, to then be met with the saddest look. Did you not know? Know what? He died. He got into a car crash on the July 6th and died. How did you not know that? I was speechless. For days I thought this wonderful guy ghosted me for no reason and was terribly pissed with him. Turns out he got clipped by a reckless driver and died on his way to our date. I don't even know how to react. I'm just so flabbergasted right now. I've known him for less than a month. How does one even deal with something like this?
People who were told they look easy to draw, What happened when someone drew you? I made a drawing of my teacher in which I made him fat and ugly. Today, I walked into class like always. The class is typically a really relaxed place. Our teacher, I'll call him Mr. Daniels, is very funny and pretty informal when it comes to banter with us. It felt like every normal day, being productive but also just cracking jokes and such. Our class is mature, we're a year from graduation, and it's a very welcome way to cool down when school's getting me stressed. Well, I got bored whilst waiting for other students to catch up on the worksheet we were doing. Taking a piece of paper, I began mindlessly doodling as always. I saw my teacher's side profile and began to try and draw. I'm not somebody who draws, by the way, so I ended up making his head pretty large and giving him a comically fat chin. I should have just crossed it out and went back to doing whatever, but my buddy was sat next to me and I decided, damn, time to be a comedian. I drew him with patchy stubble, a comically big nose, and a text bubble of him saying guys instead of guys. I guess I was trying to be comical. My shitty masterpiece was done and I just put it under my work for now, waiting for a moment to generate a few laughs amongst my peers and such. Eventually, Mr. Daniels is discussing something and he's joking to a fellow classmate, so I stupidly hold up the drawing and go, hey, I did a portrait of you. He stopped. He looked. I anticipated a smile and a ha-ha, what is that? He took the paper and told me to see him after class, because a line had just been crossed. My stomach instantly dropped and I realized that I'd done messed up, and did so badly. The last few minutes of class went by and all my classmates started smiling and laughing as I remained seated, leaving me in the room with Mr. Daniels. And the worst part? I expected him to shout, to chew me out, which was obviously deserving of me drawing a humiliating picture of him. Like, come on, I'm supposed to be looking for college placements, and here I was doing this infantile garbage. He told me that out of everybody in the class, I was the last one on the list of people he thought would have done that for some peer validation, his voice never raised, just simply echoing that dull disappointed hum. He sighed and I said sorry probably 100 times. It felt like I'd regressed back to being a scared 8-year-old in the hallway of my elementary school after misbehaving, knowing that I deserved the full consequence of whatever actions were being aimed toward me. I'd never done this before. I got high off the atmosphere of the room, and I took having a little fun way too far. He started asking me if I'd ever been picked on at my school. I answered yes, my voice cracking at points as I tried to restrict those 8-year-old schoolboy esquire tears. Yes, I know, I'm almost 18 and I was breaking under the scrutiny of my teacher, but I felt this incomprehensible titan of sheer shame. He asked me questions like who I've got at home. I said just a mother, something he once relayed to the class too. He said my way of getting forgiveness from him was to try and work on getting some college applications out, and reporting back to him on Monday. It feels like he may have felt bad for me, maybe he saw himself in what I was telling him? But I don't feel at all deserving of any of it. He started cracking a smile telling me on which colleges to avoid, which would suck, all the meanwhile I still felt like utter shit. I struggled to see why he would reply to my mean-spiritedness with trying to help me. It's been a few hours. My classmates have all laughed it off, I feel I should be too. After all, Mr. Daniels told me he's not going to log any of this and was simply going to forget it happened. But I feel like I got off lightly for a stupid act. One that betrayed one of the only people in my school trying to make education less harrowing. Zoo workers, which animal is the biggest jerk in your facility? I have visited a popular wildlife rehabilitation center in South Africa called Mahalaholo about 7 or 8 times. They have at the center arguably the world's most famous honey badger, called Stoffel. Now I am sure none of you need an introduction to how effing savage these animals are, but this particular bastard has actually been featured on multiple TV shows because of his antics. In the first few years of his life at the center, he dug his way into the lion enclosure twice and attacked the alpha male of the pride both times. When he kept digging his way under the wall of his enclosure, it had to be rebuilt 2 meters deeper into the soil. When he opened up cracks in the concrete and escaped, those had to be covered with metal sheets. When he used rocks and sticks to create a tower and climb over the wall, they removed them, only for him to steal a zookeeper's broom and climb out using that. I know many more stories of his antics, but my favorite is how after years of living on his own, they decided to find him a female companion to join him in the enclosure. First thing Stoffel did? Stood on her head and used her to climb over the wall. So the honey badger actually has this incredible survival mechanism. Their skin is really tough and really loose. When the lion clamped his jaws around Stoffel, he was actually able to rotate his skeleton within the skin and turn around to bite the lion on the nose. After the lion dropped him, Stoffel continued to terrorize the pride, but none of them wanted to be anywhere near him. I think eventually they had to tranquilize him so they could treat his wounds. The zookeeper Brian said he woke up to Stoffel scraping at the door, so he grabbed a 10,000-volt stun gun from his cupboard and zapped the honey badger with it. Stoffel didn't move. Didn't even flinch. Brian says he just got angrier and started growling. He had to climb out of the window and lock all the doors, while they formulated a plan to contain this bastard. I can hear my neighbor talk to his cat. Every day when my neighbor comes home from work, he unlocks his door and says hello to Kevin, and Kevin the cat meows back in greeting. Our apartment building is small and I can hear nearly everything that happens in the communal hallways in my living room. I don't know my neighbor at all, not even his name, but I know his cat. My neighbor also likes to smoke a lot of grass. No shame. I like to indulge too, just not every day. I work from home and live alone, but hearing hello Kevin has become a part of my routine. It makes me smile every time. Yesterday I heard the normal hello, Kevin greeting and Kevin's meow. I later smelled the grass he smoked. Then I heard him go into the laundry room and come back, but then I heard something odd. Kevin's meowing was super loud and he sounded pissed. I waited a little while, but Kevin persisted. I opened up my door and saw Kevin outside the neighbor's door. He was practically screaming and jumping up to hit the door with his little paws. Inside the apartment, I heard my neighbor echoing Kevin's cries. My neighbor sounded frantic and desperate, calling Kevin over and over again. I walked up to the door and knocked. I heard my neighbor pause and then quietly, with amazement and perhaps fear, repeat Kevin. At the last minute, I decided to dart back into my apartment and softly close the door, listening while my neighbor let Kevin in. He whispered, "How did you do that, Kevin?" I've been laughing to myself about it since it happened, imagining my stoned out of his mind neighbor contemplating how his human cat knocked on his door. What is the most gruesome thing you have ever seen? Had an experience like a few of them here working as a Boy Scout National Camp counselor for the third summer in a row, and there were 3 of us on the first day of our one long weekend off of the campgrounds. Literally an hour into our only consecutive 2 nights off of the entire summer, and we're driving on these winding sharp-edged mountain roads in the Sierras, and there's a red pickup truck a ways ahead of us, and I was just kind of lazily watching it disappear behind each turn in these crazy mountain roads, and it would slowly slide into view again, and my coworker was asking me something but the window was down and I couldn't really hear what he was saying in the back. So, still watching the pickup, I was leaning back in the passenger seat to hear him, and as I turned my head a little, mid-question he goes, oh crap. And all 3 of us watched an RV plow head-on into the pickup truck coming the other direction and had to be combined over 100 miles per hour. The engine looked like it exploded into a million pieces of paper-thin chaff, and the dump of adrenaline made everything seem like it slowed down, because I clearly remember watching 2 bodies just violently ejected from the cab of the pickup in near-perfect clarity. We were 2 EMT basics and a lifeguard. That's the qualifications we had to have for the activities we ran at the camp, so we were already getting out to the car and running to manage the scene as first responders, and the pickup is off to the right, wedged up against a metal road barrier and twisted into itself almost, but the back of the cab behind the door bulkhead, the little side windows weren't even broken on the left side. So my buddy goes to manage the pickup, my other buddy is already halfway to the RV that's had steam or smoke pouring out from the front, and I am running to the first person lying in the road. I was wrong about 2 bodies being ejected, it was 2.5. I knew that this guy was the driver, and I had watched the amputation of his arm as he was being thrown from the cab, but I wasn't prepared for what I believe was an initial compression injury to the torso before the forces on his body essentially disleaved everything from where his right arm was to a little above his navel. Everything was still compressed though, so there were vertebrae that had essentially squeezed out somewhere along his thoracic spine. Significant facial trauma, bottom jaw essentially sheared off, and I could see a huge gaping hole into his sinuses. It made me dizzy. I don't really know how to describe the part of his wife that made it out of the car into the road. I don't even remember stopping to assess for care. It was just parts and fabric, not enough of a person, nothing recognizable. And then a little further off I could see someone laying in the road, and from where I was they looked pretty beat up and definitely a broken arm. I saw that she's a younger girl as I ran up to her. I'm trying to remember how to check for TBI and wondering about managing her airway. She's 12 or 14 maybe, and I'm right there up to her, and I thought I saw her chest move, and I'm kneeling down to start to assess her injuries, and she's dead. I can see her head open in back over her left occipital lobe, and I can see some of her brain. There was nothing I could have done. And as I go to stand up to reorient myself, she says, "Mom?" and smacks her lips like she was thirsty, and on instinct and shock I think I am down right by her to stabilize her head. Her eyes aren't moving, but she keeps quietly, intermittently, either silently mouthing "Mom?" or weakly saying it, fading each time, and I don't even know what to do or could have done, and I don't know how long I sat with her and told her it was okay. She never responded to me. I FKT even think she heard me. I tried to brush the hair from her face and tell her it was okay, but my hands were just covered in blood and shaking, and her hair just stuck to my hands. It seemed maybe it was a minute I was there, maybe 2. It felt like forever, and I just listened to her ask for her mom until she was gone, and I told her it was okay, and that's it. Not a single heroic thing was done, and I doubt I even eased her passing at all. She wanted her mom. The other 2 guys didn't have it much better. The rest of the mom was in the car. Rotational and shear avulsions had separated what I found in the street from what was left in the car. The section of the cab that wasn't crushed and had that intact window is actually where a lot of the force was transferred, and the car seat that was strapped there had been press crushed from the cab buckling. I never looked, but I was later told that there was a victim that had been occupying the seat when they crashed, traumatically slaughtering the child. The driver of the RV was an elderly woman who had taken over driving duties while her husband napped in the back. She had alcohol on her breath, and they both had been drinking all day apparently. She suffered a broken ankle in the crash, and her husband had a ragged cut on his forearm from a cabinet pull he landed on after falling out of bed. Cops were there faster than I expected, and they asked us a bunch of questions. That's also the day I decided that a career as an EMT was not in the cards for me. We didn't end up taking our long weekend. My shameless ex-fiancée told her parents that I got cold feet and abandoned her. So I told her parents the truth, and it caused a SHT storm for her. Amy let me know that she had a pretty wild past. She wanted to be honest and upfront with me. I told her I didn't care, but I did have concerns about whether she was wanting to settle down, which I kept to myself. She had told me how her past had caused a lot of strain with her parents, but didn't really go into detail. I pushed all that aside and dove in. We had an amazing relationship. Over the years, I grew pretty close to her parents, and I spent a lot of time at their house helping her dad with projects. We'd often all 3 go out to lunch after. They are wonderful people. After dating for about 3 years, I proposed. Amy was ecstatic, but her parents were even more excited. We had what seemed like a fairy tale engagement. Anyway, Ally was a coworker of Amy's, and they became really close. Ally is one of the kindest and most sincere people that I have ever met. One weekend Amy's friend, Sarah, invited her on a weekend trip to Vegas. Now Sarah was not someone I liked. She was a friend from that time in Amy's life who was a very bad influence. She would pressure her to drink, do drugs, hook up, etc. I heard her call me boring multiple times on the phone with Amy and even told her that she should break up with me a couple times. Kidding, of course. I wasn't thrilled about the idea, but Sarah invited Amy's friend Ally, which made me feel a lot better. Ally was a coworker of Amy's, and we all became really good friends over the years. Ally is one of the kindest and most sincere people that I have ever met. They went to a club one night, and some guys were all over them. They invited the girls to their penthouse upstairs where they were throwing an after-party. Amy and Ally declined, but Sarah guilt-tripped them into going. During the party, Ally was alone and wanted to go back to their room and sleep. She went looking for Sarah and Amy to see if they wanted to leave or let them know she was leaving. She found them in a room. Sarah was hooking up with one guy. And Amy was having a threesome with two guys. The next morning Amy begged Ally not to say anything to me and Sarah said it was her fault. When they got back, Ally told me everything right away. To her credit, Amy did not deny any of it. She said she freaked out about getting married and fucked up. I was crushed, but obviously called off the wedding and broke up on the spot. I had not told many people about what happened except my immediate family. This all happened 6 months ago. I saw Amy's parents at a hardware store a week ago. They expressed how sad they were that we broke up. Her mom, who I was close with, asked me what happened. She didn't think I was the cold feet type and could just cut Amy out of my life. I was so confused, but then kind of awkwardly clarified that when she was partying with Sarah, she decided to cheat on me. With two guys. At the same time. They were sad, but not surprised. They had hoped she was turning a new leaf. About 2 days later, I got a slew of texts from Amy. She was pissed that I told them and saw it as a way for me to get back at her by turning her parents on her. She said she gave me everything I wanted in the breakup and apologized a million times. It was true, she moved out immediately, worked out canceling wedding plans, etc. It was a clean break, no drama. That said, her parents were super pissed about throwing away our relationship. They told her sister, who Amy always competed with and hated for slut-shaming her constantly. Her parents are pretty well off and gave her sister and my brother-in-law a huge amount of money to get their lives started. They promised the same for Amy, but told her that they are going to just donate it since they don't want to finance her lifestyle. I kind of knew it might happen but didn't really care. I would have been fine keeping it to myself until I found out she told them that I basically got cold feet and abandoned her.
My bully professor is forcing me to turn my camera on while I'm at my cancer treatment appointment, so I maliciously complied and got my sweet revenge. My supervisor for the ambassador program, Miss Mary, has spent the majority of our time together belittling me. She follows every rule to the letter and leaves no room for collaboration or discussion. For example, we use Microsoft Teams for communication, and she has us clock in and out in a group of 20 people by saying I'm here, I'm leaving. So every day you have to scroll through dozens of messages to find anything of import and listen to notification sounds every time someone takes a lunch break. I suggested using the time clock function on Teams and even offered to set it up for us, and was told that I was deliberately undermining her position. Another quick example is her vehemence when I told her I didn't have any social media to advertise the college. She was certain I was lying and went so far as to ask the other ambassadors to try and find me. They didn't because there's nothing to find. Crazy concept. I've challenged her at several junctures, but ultimately realized I was fighting a losing battle and I'd be better off keeping my head down. Fast forward to 4 days ago, there was a mandatory virtual event in 3 days where the college dean would talk to ambassadors like me and live stream the event to the college's website and YouTube page. Miss Mary sent out a message that students must have their cameras on and phones off. Repeat. Phones off. Cameras on. I followed up the same day saying, Miss Mary, unfortunately, I will be at a doctor's appointment at this time and will be unable to turn my camera on during the event. No response. I send another email to follow up and still no response. I was diagnosed with a rare ovarian cancer at the beginning of this year. I'm a private person to the extent that I have dated people for years without telling my parents, so you best believe random co-workers and bosses are unaware of my medical history. The day of the event rolls around. I directly message her through Microsoft Teams 10 minutes before. I see that she's seen the message with a read receipt and she said nothing. Now, video chat starts and several students join the session with their cameras on, then the dean. He gets halfway through introducing himself and Miss Mary interrupts him as he takes a brief pause and says, "Excuse me, could we please have all of the students turn their cameras on?" I say nothing but put a quick message I already had typed in anticipation in the group chat. Miss Mary, the first have a private situation that bars me from turning on my camera. I have contacted you individually. Not but a few seconds after I send it, I get called out by name, and I respond audibly, Miss Mary, the first cannot turn on my camera at this time. She responds, expectations were clear and you were told multiple times about this. Every other student here managed to do it and I expect the same out of you. I told one of my nurses, Amy, about this situation beforehand. She joked that if I was told to turn my camera on, I should really play up my illness. In any other situation, I would have been entirely opposed, but sweet revenge was in sight. I set my laptop back a bit further from myself on my leg so you could see the entirety of me in my hospital regalia. Teams will display the person currently talking as the largest image in chat. Everyone had their audio off except me, the dean, and Miss Mary, So when I turned my camera on, I was displayed as the EKG loudly thrummed away. Silence. I said. I asked Miss Mary through email and Teams if I could opt out of having my camera on, but she insisted. I waited a beat to see if anyone would say anything and then continued with my special vocal blend of melodramatic gratitude and illness-laden shakiness. Virtual engagement is so important for this new era of learning. I can see why having the camera on is important, though I was hoping I might be granted an exception. The dean said, Miss Rachel, you are more than welcome to turn your camera off. I am so sorry for the misunderstanding. I responded with, thank you so much for making a special exception for me. It's been a difficult week, but I feel grateful to be here. Then, two people leave the call. One was Miss Mary and the other was Anthony, who is Miss Mary's boss. I didn't know he'd be there. Haven't heard from either of them yet, but I'm awaiting a follow-up with anticipation. I am here and alive. I hospital, and above all, this stupid disease won't stop me from putting a bully in their godden place.
Has your child ever threatened to report you to the police and gone through with it? I raised my stepson through most of his teenage years. He was a troubled young man, and his mother tossed him out because she couldn't deal with him. I promised him that I would make his life miserable for the next 5 years, and kept up my end of the bargain. One day, I found out that he had brought cigarettes into the house. Because of my health issues, this was unacceptable. I tried to grab the cigarettes. He picked up the phone, pre-cell phone era, and dialed 911. My stepmother is beating on me. A blatant lie. I simply tried to grab the jacket with cigarettes. Then he was asked to describe me. Blue dress, 5'8", 150 pounds. My dress was not blue. I am barely 5 feet 4 inches, and haven't weighed 150 for many years. Assured that an officer was on the way, he sat in the middle of the living room, clutching his jacket. His dad and I sat on the couch, still dressed from church, me in heels and him in suit and tie. When the officer stepped in, Scott immediately stood up and said, "Take me to jail. They won't let me smoke here." The officer lit into Scott. "You are under 18. You have to do what your parents say. We won't let you smoke in jail, either. You could be arrested for wasting my time." The officer then left after assuring us that we did nothing wrong. It was the only time Scott tried that trick. What is your biggest secret desire that you were ashamed of telling anyone? I was a lifeguard for 4 years in my teens. This was a city pool. This guy, let's call him Guy, probably late 20s, dove head first into the pool. The kiddie pool, very, very shallow. I saw it, blew the whistle, and gave him a head shake. He acknowledged, rubs his chest because he scraped it on the bottom, and I thought it was over with. 5 minutes later, he dives head first into the kiddie section of the pool, 2 feet. I blow the whistle, call him over, and talk to him sternly about how I'm not reprimanding him for any other reason than that I don't want to have to backboard him for a spinal. Guy agrees, says it was stupid, apologizes and walks away. Cue mess up number 3. Guy walks away from me, over to this 6-foot water slide we have for the little kids. This is the cutest water slide, but still towers over its primary users, 2-year-olds. Along his way to the slide, Guy scoops up what I assume is his son, and puts him at the top of the slide, still standing up. This kid couldn't be more than 2 to 3 years old, had floaties on and all. Guy points at me, and over the regular pool ruckus, I hear him yell, "See that lifeguard? He told me he wants you to jump off the side of the slide." He then proceeds to point at the concrete. I see the kid's knees buckle as he goes to jump, and my heart sinks like a rock to my stomach. I immediately shoot out of my chair and yell, "Hey!" 2 things of note. 1. As a guard, you're never to stand on your tower unless you see someone in apparent danger. This is so other guards have a clear sign that something's going down, and to pay attention and get help. 2. I have a deep voice, a very deep voice. I'm quiet often, but when I get mad, I utilize it to my advantage. What one of my friends later described as the voice of God echoes put across the pool, and the entire place falls quiet. Guy immediately puts his son down on the ground and starts walking towards me. I call over my manager, explain it all, and she tells him he will be removed by the police after any other incidents. He apologizes, then goes on about his pool experience. 2 hours later, I'm in the 5-foot section, deepest aside from the 12 to 20-foot sections. Guy is walking along with friends, sees me in the chair, and goes, "Watch this." I'm still surprised he didn't say hold my beer instead. He runs and dives in really deep. Mess up number 4, reporting for duty. In front of his son, who was behind the legs of some other bro and peeks out after his dad submerges. Guy floats up to the surface of the pool face down and unresponsive. We had to evacuate the pool, stabilize and backboard him, and he is now in a wheelchair with a broken neck and a really damaged spine. Teachers of Reddit, what is the most delusional thing you've seen a parent do? I teach 3rd grade. One of my kids, who made A's on nearly everything, had gotten an 87 on a creative writing assignment. The morning of the day after I passed the papers back to them, she came up to me looking a little embarrassed and said her mom was going to come in around noon to talk to me about the grade. Past teachers had warned me that this girl had a helicopter mom, but I hadn't had any bad experiences with her yet, and we were a couple months into the school year. Sure enough, right as the lunch bell was about to ring, the door bursts open and in storms helicopter mom. She looked furious. I could tell she was about to lay into me in front of my entire class, but then a piercing metallic shriek hit my ears. One of her rotors had clipped the wall and she just started falling apart and spinning out of control. A rotor flew across the room and killed 2 and injured 3, and then she crashed into our terrarium and burst into flames, killing the class's pet frog Scooter, and shrapnel from the wreckage peppered the front row of kids.
My husband called me by his dead wife's name twice. Please help. I met my husband 4 years ago through the same work industry and we both instantly felt the same attraction. On our first date he told me he was widowed, that his wife had died unexpectedly at the age of 31, 2 years prior. 3 years later, we got married at the beginning of this year. Everything has been good until 2 months after we got married. I've noticed that his behavior was changing, he started to get more quiet and kept to himself. He stopped telling me about his day or talking to me about his niche interests like he usually does. I asked him if he was feeling alright because this behavior was really unusual. He admitted that while cleaning, he came across some of his previous wife's belongings and that he accidentally tossed something from their wedding night. I felt sad for him and I couldn't imagine how he felt as this is my first marriage. I tried my best to cheer him up but his happiness was short. One night, we got into a small disagreement about some movie we were watching. During the argument, he called me by her name, which is something that he had never done. He looked frightened and shocked that he said this. He kept apologizing after it and I told him it was alright. He cried and I held him. The next morning, I noticed he didn't sleep at all. I asked him if he wanted to talk about what happened the previous night. He got mad and told me he was gonna go visit his brother. I felt worried and told him I love him just for reassurance. It did hurt that he called me by her name, but part of me wanted to understand where he was coming from. I know he really loved this woman and sometimes I don't think I can amount to her. It seems like he holds her to a pedestal and I'm just there. I have hoped he doesn't actually feel that way, but with the recent events, I'm starting to think about it more and more. He came home around midnight and he apologized for what happened and how he reacted. I told him everything was fine and didn't express my concerns because I didn't want it to turn into another huge argument. A few weeks ago, we were having intimacy and while he was finishing, he called me by her name again. This time I was mortified, jumped off the bed, and moved away from him. He tried to comfort me by giving me a hug and he kept apologizing. I told him I was going to stay in our guest room and I did not feel up to a confrontation right now. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, he kept apologizing and told him it's fine. We talked for a bit. I asked him if he was alright and if he needed to speak to someone professionally. He agreed to go speak to someone, but he didn't show up to the appointment that we had set up for him. Our conversation since then has been insanely short. Everything has been weird since he called me her name during intimacy. He rarely speaks to me, only when he needs something. Which makes me sad because I do love him, but I'm scared that he doesn't love me. Worst of all, I recently found out that I'm pregnant. I'm happy because I've always wanted to be a mother, but I am sad I don't know if the father of my child even loves me anymore.
I am excited. How tall are you, BTW? If you don't mind me asking. I am as well. It'll be a good time. No problem at all. I am 6 foot. How tall are you? I'm 5 feet 0 inches. Ha ha ha. That's good. I like taller guys. I'm not really into short guys, so just making sure. So where were you thinking of going for dinner? That seems kind of shallow, no? But who am I to judge because I'm not really into short girls and like taller girls. I think it's best that we don't go out to dinner anymore. Best of luck on your tall guy search. Are you freaking kidding me? What is the most impolite thing a customer has done to you? Years ago I was running a pharmacy department in a grocery store. The pharmacy just happened to be near the frozen food aisle. It was shortly before closing time. For the pharmacy, grocery store was 24 hours, and I was alone in the pharmacy when a mother carrying her baby brought in a prescription for an antibiotic for the baby. As I was working on that, a guy in a suit walked up to the register with a half-gallon of ice cream. Normally we would not ring out grocery items there, but all of the grocery checkout aisles were backed up with lines, so I figured I would help the guy out when I was done with the customer I was waiting on, so I said to him, "I will be with you as soon as I am done here." He then blew up with a string of profanity about customer service and I said, "I am helping this customer and will help you when I have taken care of them." I mean, the woman had a sick baby fussing and crying. This really set him off and he is yelling and carrying on something infantile. The woman with the baby says to me, "Just go ahead and get him out of here." So I went over to the register and rang up his ice cream, which he paid cash for rather than using a card, so it slowed me down even more. As I handed him his change I paused for a second, causing him to look up at my face. I then, in a quiet voice, said, "Are you always this much of in a hole or is there something special about tonight?" Gave him his change and he just stood there for a few seconds as I walked back over to finish the baby's prescription. The next morning the store manager was walking past and I stopped him and told him what had happened and what I had said so that he would be prepared if the guy complained. I still get a chuckle out of his reply. He said, "Why were you so nice to him?" I would have thrown his out of the store and told him to never come back. What's the most messed up thing a family member of yours has done? So, I was about 2 when my dad got my mom a job with his Boilermakers union. Awesome pay, great benefits, the whole nine. And my mom, she takes a liking to her boss. So they go off to Europe to have foreign intimacy, and long story short, my sister was conceived in the Eiffel Tower elevator. So she comes home to be with family, but her boss is not with her. She comes home to my father, who works and supports her as she carries and births another man's baby. And then he raises this child for 19 years. Not only does he treat her as well as he treats me, but she's the baby and she gets extra spoiled. He takes such good care of us and helps us buy and pick and fix our first cars. He does all the labor around the farm, and he's there for us through absolutely anything. So he's supporting my mom, her 2 sisters and me and my sister, all while my mom and the oldest sister play up minor disabilities to get Social Security on top of the $3K plus my dad pays them each month. I say that they were minor because my mom and one aunt have all the energy in the world when they feel like going shopping or treating themselves to a meal out. The other aunt is the middle sister. She's legally blind and so sweet, I've no idea how she came from the same place as the other two. Meanwhile, my sister's biological father sent money every birthday and Christmas for my sister. I'm talking like 3-5K for her. She received none of it, even after 18. She often ended up deeply overdrawn in her lunch money account school. Her senior year she worked 2 jobs. And my mom and older aunt had hoards of clothing and items they bought for themselves that never came out of the box or bag, tag still on. Fast forward to this year. I was overseas over this last spring to be with my long-distance partner. We found an opportunity to spend more time together before he's away for several months, so I asked my dad for a loan to extend my ticket. He said yes without a second thought, even sends me some extra to spend with my partner. Then, he passed away suddenly in April, less than a week after I was supposed to come back to the US. My mother had him cremated before I even had the chance to come home. No funeral service. The VA or Legion would have given him one for free. Shortly thereafter, it comes to light that he had a pension through his union. My mother is actually prepared to fight to keep it all before she learns I also am a named beneficiary. My sister is not. Because it was written before she was born. My mother agrees to split the lump sum for his death in such a way that we think she's willing to share it all equally. Nope. Now she's refusing to share the lump sum too, so now I split my checks with my sister. All this over some checks that only go until November anyway. Oh, and after cutting my sister out, my mother tried to get us to pay for half of his cremation. You know, then one I wasn't even able to be there for. Yeah, no. In addition to all of the above bullcrap, she's also a narcissist, a gaslighter and an all-around mistreater. Her and my older aunt would often back each other in fights and power plays. Here are some of the most idiotic laws around the world. If your country made this list, you really need to protest against your government. In Australia, it is illegal to change your own light bulb unless you are a licensed electrician. In Scotland, if anybody, knocks on your door and asks to use the toilet, you must oblige and let them in. Imagine someone takes a dookie so large and logs your toilet and you don't even know it. Ted Bundy would have had a field day with this one. Next, in Milan in Italy, I know you Americans don't know where Milan is, so I had to specify for you. Anyway, it is illegal there to frown unless it's at a hospital or funeral. Your family member just commit suicide and you frown because of it? Boo-hoo, jail. In Mexico, it is illegal to lift your feet off the pedals while riding a bicycle. I don't even got a funny comment for this one, it's just stupid. In Switzerland, it is illegal to flush the toilet after 10 p.m. What's that? You have food poisoning at 1 a.m. and feel the need to drop a tactical nuke on your toilet. No flushing, mate. Tough that stench out till the morning. And now for America. The unanimously voted and publicly recognized as by far the dumbest country in the world. In Pennsylvania, it's illegal to buy a car on a Sunday. The fine is up to $1,000 for this awful offense. In New York, at a point in time, it was illegal to flirt in public. I ain't ever going to New York. My favorite place to flirt is a public elementary school, New York. In Arizona, it's illegal to hunt camels. Sounds valid, except one problem, there's no effing camels in Arizona.
My husband got our girlfriend pregnant without discussing it with me. My husband, 38 male, and I, 30 female, have been in an open marriage for the past 2 years out of our 5 years together, and at the center of it all is our girlfriend, 26 female, a woman who has been a part of our relationship for over a year now. Things got more complicated when I found out I was pregnant, 30 weeks ago. Despite how unusual our situation might be, all 3 of us were excited to meet our baby girl. Our relationship was doing great, everything seemed perfect, but then, out of nowhere, our girlfriend announced that she was also pregnant. Honestly, I was taken aback. As far as I knew, she wasn't seeing anyone else outside our little trio. I managed to swallow my surprise and offer my congratulations, before curiosity got the better of me and I asked who the father was, and that's when she said it. The father was none other than my husband. This news hit me like a punch in the gut. We had never discussed such a possibility, never opened up the conversation about adding another child into our unusual family structure, and certainly not with our girlfriend carrying that child. I asked her to leave politely, my mind swirling with mixed emotions of shock and anger. I needed to have a serious talk with my husband about this unexpected turn of events. Apparently, she had been inspired by my own experience. Seeing me so pregnant, so excited about being a mother had made her want to become a mother. She wanted a child of her own, and so, she told my husband that she was stopping her birth control. The part that stung the most was that my husband never told this to me, neither did our girlfriend. For the past few months, they'd been having unprotected lovemaking, something I was totally unaware of. This did not follow the boundaries and rules we had set for our open relationship. To both of them, she might just be our girlfriend, however, I am his wife. It's not a role I take lightly. It felt like an extreme betrayal that my husband had made such a life-changing decision without my knowledge. Their lack of understanding just made my feelings of betrayal worse. They seemed to think that I should just be happy, as if we were all a part of this decision, but it's not that simple. My husband and I share a fetish for breeding scenarios, and they know that. It's a part of our relationship that we've both embraced, but this was a giant leap from roleplay into a very real situation that carries immense responsibility and consequence. I don't know how to make them understand the gravity of the situation, and how disrespectful their actions have been to me. I don't have the words to express the whirlwind of emotions I'm feeling right now, a mix of betrayal, hurt, and confusion. They've crossed the line, a boundary that I thought was understood and respected within our relationship. I just hope I can find a way to communicate this to them, to help them understand the gravity of what they've done.
Teachers of Reddit, what is the most delusional thing you've seen a parent do? I teach 3rd grade. One of my kids, who made A's on nearly everything, had gotten an 87 on a creative writing assignment. The morning of the day after I passed the papers back to them, she came up to me looking a little embarrassed and said her mom was going to come in around noon to talk to me about the grade. Past teachers had warned me that this girl had a helicopter mom, but I hadn't had any bad experiences with her yet, and we were a couple months into the school year. Sure enough, right as the lunch bell was about to ring, the door burst open and in storms helicopter mom. She looked furious. I could tell she was about to lay into me in front of my entire class, but then a piercing metallic shriek hit my ears. One of her rotors had clipped the wall and she just started falling apart and spinning out of control. A rotor flew across the room and killed 2 and injured 3, and then she crashed into our terrarium and burst into flames, killing the class's pet frog Scooter, and shrapnel from the wreckage peppered the front row of kids. My sister-in-law laid hands on my child. My wife is on her side. When my wife and I started dating, she told me that her sister is a little special because during her adolescence she was abused by her first boyfriend, and thanks to that she tends to become a little aggressive when she hears screams or loud noises. Due to her traumas and her past experience, it bothers me that my sister-in-law is sometimes left alone with my 4-year-old son. However, everything was going well until yesterday. My son recently started kindergarten and I got home late to see my wife arguing with her sister in a low voice but in a quite aggressive tone. I went to look for my child but my wife stopped me. She told me that he is sleeping. I told her that I will still go and greet him, but she insisted, and her sister tried to leave very quickly. I started to get suspicious. I went to see my child directly, and when I saw him he was in his room crying and with a wound on his cheek. From that moment on everything went downhill. I ran out to follow my sister-in-law knowing that she went to pick up the child from kindergarten that day as no one was available. She saw me and got scared. My wife stood between the two of us and said that nothing happened, only that the child fell and that he got hurt. I asked her sister to tell the truth, and after putting enough pressure on her she started crying and said that my son had an accident, but when he started crying she slapped him to keep him quiet because it was making her nervous. She said she did not realize how much her recent steroid use impacted her strength and that she did not know that she would hurt him. I should say that she didn't apologize at any time. That only made me angrier, so I yelled at her in the middle of the street. In the middle of my anger I told her, "I'm glad that your ex treated you the way you deserved." I don't even know how that were the first words that went out of my mouth. After calming down I returned to the house and my wife came back some time later angry with me for what I said, that this was supposed to be a secret, that her sister didn't know that I knew, that now her sister is angry with her for going around saying that she was abused in her first relationship. I asked her how she could be angry with me and not with her sister for attacking our son. She told me that she was angry with her but that I crossed the line by insulting her in the middle of the street. She also told me that it is normal for adults to lay hands on children to shut them up, that their mother used to do it often, but what I did was very low. Currently she and I are sleeping in separate rooms.
Women, what's the worst that a man ever treated you? I married my high school sweetheart. When we were together at first, age 17, he was so wonderful. Funny, smart, sweet. For my first Christmas present, he got me a new stereo system for my shitty '98 Pontiac Sunfire. We lost our virginities to each other. We were a year apart in high school, so I did community college to stick near him until he graduated. I went to the college he chose. Once we got there, he was the only one of his friend group, who also went to the same college from high school, who had a girlfriend. I immediately got left by the wayside. I had no friends, so I tried to make some. I realized, but not enough, that my whole identity was wrapped up in my boyfriend. By the way, the gifts stopped being thoughtful. Then they became non-existent. He went out with his friend group and left me alone. When I cried to him in my dorm about how I felt alone, and maybe we should break up, he started crying too and said that wasn't what he wanted. While I was on my knees with tears on my face crying about how alone I felt, he asked me if I'd give him a blowjob. I did. I was young and stupid and we didn't break up. Fast forward through college. I started to notice that at every party we went to, he was always more animated and having more fun with anyone as long as I wasn't there. Once, he gave a girl a piggyback ride right in front of me because she asked him to. When I spoke up about how I felt sidelined and neglected, I was told I was crazy. This would become the battle cry every time we fought. I didn't know what gaslighting was then, but I do now. One of the clearest memories I have of him was just before I graduated college. He asked if I had studied Flash, and I said no because it was on its way out and no one was using it anymore. I remember it was the day of the Super Bowl and our roommates were out. We had been watching the Puppy Bowl just before this conversation. We got into an argument. He tried to tell me I was wrong and I just said I knew more about the subject than he did. He wrapped his hands around my throat and pushed me back on the bed. He choked me. When I started gasping and crying, he let me go. And he had the nerve to say, "God damn it, why did you make me do that?" I should have left right then. After college. He didn't have a job, so he decided to go to graduate school. He said I'd need to support him, otherwise he'd have to pull from his inheritance. I had a full-time job in a recession in my field, which was rare. So I supported him that way, and when funds ran low, I took out payday loans. At his insistence, I got him a job at my agency. He got laid off a month before our wedding. I worked through that, we got married, then I found another place to work since I was mad the agency had laid him off. Meanwhile, still no job for him. I once asked if he'd just get a job at Walmart or Target or something, just to take some pressure off me, and he said I guess I'll just have to deal with the depression when people I know see me working there. I didn't make him get a job. Eventually, I had enough and said let's move from our college town back to the big city where we were both from. Our friends and family were there, he would have more opportunities. I wasn't worried about myself, I had a good resume. He balked. I said, you know what, I pay the rent here, I'm not renewing our lease. I'm moving back to the city and you can come with me if you want. He started applying to jobs. Right away, he got one, making twice what he made before. Everything was great. Right? Wrong. I negotiated my contract to work from home, then when that didn't work switched over to another job. Still working from home once we'd moved, making decent money. But as soon as he had his real job he changed. Started spending exorbitant amounts on new glasses, clothes, shoes. Started working out. You know where this is going. There was one more incident of violence. We were arguing. About something I can't recall. I said I was just going to go to sleep and turned my back on him, ready to get into bed. He shoved me, hard, from behind. I landed on my hands and knees and started crying. He said, verbatim, "You're fine. Stop crying like someone's going to feel sorry for you." Long story short, too late, he ended up cheating on me with a coworker. His assistant, as if that couldn't get more cliché. We even went to her wedding, for God's sake. He tried to tell me there was no one else, we'd just grown apart. Now, the thing is, that's true. That's part of the warning. You change so much between ages 17 and 30. Some people can make it work, but some can't. His motivations weren't based on our changes, however. He already had a new model lined up, 5 years younger than me. No matter. I honestly don't miss him, and I'm glad he's gone, even though it hurt so much at the start. But aside from the emotional scars, he left me with so much more. If I hadn't been with him for so long, I would have moved to Florida. It was always my dream, not so much these days. I wouldn't have destroyed my credit with those stupid payday loans, which I don't take out anymore. I wouldn't have wasted my prime years where he told me he wanted to have babies with me, then only to back up right before the clock started ticking. Young women, please, value yourselves more than I did. Know and realize when things are bad. Get out when the getting's good, or hold on to the good man that you have. Do better than I did.
Neighbors kept blocking me in, so I unleashed cheese, snow, and parking tickets on them. Sorry it's a bit long. So 2 years ago in undergrad, I lived in an apartment off campus and rented one of 3 garage spots in the building. Because of the layout of the driveway, a car parked anywhere in the driveway would prevent access in or out of all 3 spots. For this reason, no one was allowed to park in the driveway, as was made clear by signage outside. Of course, other people in my building and the building next door would quite often leave a car or 2 in the driveway, sometimes just for 10 minutes, sometimes overnight. This became quite frustrating to those of us parking there, especially because we were paying so much for those spots. The main culprits were the guys in the unit above me. The first time I really interacted with them, they laughed about how it was so funny that we would get so annoyed that they blocked us in. Needless to say, this really irritated me, and I knew it would continue unless I took action. Yes, I did email the landlord about it first, and no, they did not respond. This drove me to pursue alternate methods of discouraging the driveway trespassers. The first tactic was known as the cheese drop. As the name suggests, whenever I noticed a car parked in my driveway for an extended period of time, I would go out on my balcony next to the driveway and drop a slice of cheese down onto the car. It was provolone and it was expired, so even better. After doing this several times, I eventually saw them discover the cheese, and they were amused by it.
What is the stupidest thing you've done just to show you could do it? In grade school, maybe age 11 or 12, I had these cheap jeans. I figured out that I could flex my belly and pop the button open. Found this funny and guy friends in class got a laugh too. One of them turns to a girl, "Hey girl, check out what op can do." I flexed my belly and let out a huge fart while the button popped open. She turned away, my buddy laughed, and I never did this trick again. A buddy bet I couldn't finish the spiciest chicken sandwich at this joint known for insanely spicy chicken in under 30 minutes. I knew I effed up when they gave me gloves to eat the sandwich so the sauce couldn't touch my skin and made me sign a waiver. Won the bet, but really I lost in the end. I, at age like 9 to 10, wanted a cookie that my friend had. Said friend proceeded to completely lick the entire cookie. "Still want it?" he said, holding it out. Dumbass me proceeded to grab it and eat it in one bite. Total power move looking back on it.
Am I the a-hole for sleeping naked on top of the covers to teach my flatmate's girlfriend a lesson? I'm a 21-year-old guy living with my childhood best friend, who's the same age as me and also a guy. We have done it for 2 years now. Up until last week, things were perfect between us. However, he recently got a new girlfriend and she honestly seems absolutely great except for one thing. She seemingly has a complete aversion to knocking. She and I have quite a lot in common, and I actually don't mind her staying over. However, it bugs the hell out of me when she just barges into my room without knocking first. Now, she's never walked in on me doing anything untoward. I'm usually just chilling on my bed or studying at my desk. However, on at least 7 separate occasions, she's done it first thing in the morning to ask if I want coffee. I sleep naked. Every time prior to the last one, I've been under the covers and she hasn't seen anything. I always point out that she could have seen me and she should knock. She just giggles and says but I didn't. When she stayed over last week, in order to make my point, I intentionally slept on top of the covers. Sure enough, she barges in at 7 a.m., begins to ask if I want coffee and sees my you know what. She immediately backed out of the room and didn't speak to me for the rest of the day. My mate later pulled me aside and said I was bang out of order, accused me of deliberately exposing myself and pointed out that I'd threatened to do it before. I didn't, I literally just said okay but what if I had no covers and you saw everything? They're now framing this to others that I'm some sick creep who intentionally got naked and lay in wait for her because that's how I get my rocks off, and I'm kinda seeing how it came off that way. Am I the a-hole for doing this? I broke up with my insecure girlfriend because she kept asking if I'd love her if she was a worm. She went too far with this one. I've been in a relationship with my now fiancée, Sarah, for 3 years. She is the daughter of my mother's childhood friend. They always wanted their kids to get married but never pushed us or said anything. But somehow we liked each other and fell in love. After dating for 2 years, I proposed to her 1 year ago. We agreed to get married after her graduation. However, Sarah has a bad habit. She likes to play mind games with me and see my reaction. If she doesn't like the reaction, she gets angry or sad. She asks questions like, hey, what if I'm unable to have intimacy for the rest of my life and unable to have children? Will you still marry me? I try to answer emotionally or make her happy, but she always forces me to answer rationally and expects me to be honest. But if I give her a rational answer, she gets mad or sad, saying I only love her because of her body and I only want her for intimacy. I understand that marriage is not about intimacy only. Love, trust, patience, intimacy, everything is needed to make a marriage work, otherwise, it can't last. She makes these fake scenarios, wants me to answer rationally, but gets angry when I do so. She does this once or twice a week. I tried to talk to her, saying, babe, please. I hate these questions. I can understand stupid ones like would you love me if I was a worm? But these questions are serious, and I can't handle these extra dramas. I really love you, but I just want to relax and spend some quality time with you after work. Recently, she crossed a line. One of my coworkers was badly roped by somatics, and she was in the hospital for a week. The boss gave her a PTO for 2 months. She and her husband both broke down emotionally. She is scared to even see a man, and her husband can't tolerate the pain she is in. I took him to a bar a few times. Every time he cried because of what happened to her and how he failed to protect her. Their marriage is falling apart. Sarah knew everything about these events. So a few days ago, after I came back from work and was relaxing on the sofa, she came to me and out of nowhere brought up my coworker's story and asked me, babe, will you still love me if I get roped and unable to come close to you for years? Will you still love me? My answer was yes, I will be there for you. But she kept pushing, like what if they made me pregnant? What if they injured my private parts? I was getting more and more annoyed and angry because rope is one of the biggest tragedies that can happen to a woman. The horror and terror of it are impossible for a person to imagine. For her partner, it is also horrifying and extremely depressing to see her in such a vulnerable state. But she somehow created this scenario and wants me to give her a rational answer. But I can't because I never experienced such horror, and I never want to be in that position, and I honestly don't know how I would handle the situation. But she kept testing my patience. After that, I said I was done. I took off my engagement ring and said I am done with you. I work 12 hours a day, but I still try to find time to do something for you. I try to buy you flowers, take you out on dates, try to buy everything you ask, cook for you often, and do everything I can to make you happy. All I asked for in return is peace and positive energy. I can't take these games anymore, and I can't apologize every time for some fake scenario you created in your head. I can't handle that extra stress. I walked out of my house. She kept screaming at me and crying loudly. I am currently staying at my mom's home. She kept calling me and texting me. I didn't answer. I honestly can't handle her right now. I am tired, stressed, angry, and depressed all at once. Am I the a-hole for breaking up the engagement for this reason?
My sister's creepy child-loving boyfriend has a crush on my son. I think my sister's boyfriend, 44, is infatuated with my son, 13. I, 38, am a single mother living on a waitress salary. Times are tough right now, and due to unforeseen circumstances, I've had to move in with my sister for the past couple of months. It's not an ideal situation, but I'm doing my best. I have an ex-husband, 40, who is emotionally abusive, hence the divorce. We share custody of my incredible son, let's call him Roman, who has been so understanding of our financial situation, even at his age. I love him more than I love myself. He is kind and intelligent. He stole my ex-husband's face, unfortunately, so he's beautiful. The amount of adults my age and older who have given him the creepy and unwarranted "he's going to be a heartbreaker in a few years" comments would alarm you. He has ADHD but maintains decent grades. He plays a sport and is good at it. He's got many friends he visits often, and vice versa. Despite the changes in our living situation, he is thriving, and I'd do anything to keep that up. My sister, let's call her Sarah, 42, and her boyfriend, let's call him David, are well off and live in a massive house. My sister was happy to take me in, but her boyfriend, David, not so much, which I completely understand. I offered to pay rent, but my sister won't have any of it, so I do chores around the house and cook as often as my work schedule will let me. I never saw much of David anyway. He was often at the bar with his friends, working, or locked in his room playing video games. When we did see each other, he acted like I didn't exist. My son Roman was staying with his dad for a while as I was figuring things out, and I was worried about David's attitude once my son moved in with us. I talked to David and promised him that Roman would be respectful and well-behaved, but he was weird about it and shrugged me off. Then David met Roman. David is absolutely fascinated with my kid. His disposition changed so quickly that it gave me whiplash. Suddenly, he stopped locking himself in his room and decided to spend time with us, well, mostly my son. He helps Roman with his homework. He watches all of Roman's favorite shows so that they can talk about them together. He buys him food and gifts. My sister Sarah is over the moon. She's been telling me about how us moving in has been the best thing for their relationship because David is happier now. I thought it was sweet at first. But in the back of my head, something more nefarious could be happening. To paint a clearer picture, I've noted some other changes. I've noticed that I can't decide whether they're innocent. David texts my son often, which wouldn't be weird, except he does it at school. The texts aren't weird, but David lightly scolds him for not replying sometimes. Before my son moved in, David was rarely ever home during the afternoon/evenings. According to my sister, he'd stay out after work and drink with his buddies until late in the night, a habit he's had for years. Now, he's home all the time. He gets home before Roman gets off the bus, around 3:15 p.m. if he's not at practice, and stays home all day, even offering to babysit while I'm working through the evening. He still drinks, just in the house. Last Wednesday, I woke up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. To get to the bathroom, you have to pass by my son's room. I was surprised that the door was closed all the way since Roman always likes it open because his room gets hot at night. Also, he has been staying up late texting his friends lately, which has caused him to sleep through his alarm and miss the bus some days. So that night, I opened the door to let the air in and make sure he was asleep, and there was David. Standing by Roman's bed. In the dark. He said he was looking for his cell phone, but I saw him jump with anxiety when I opened the door. He left quickly, muttering something about how it might be in the kitchen. Why would his phone be in my son's room? And why was the door closed? David offers to drive my son everywhere he needs to go. Only him. School, if he misses the bus, practice, his friends' houses. This is the same man who wouldn't lift a finger for me until my son moved in. It's been incredibly helpful since I'm not home often, but a part of me wonders if he's doing it for the wrong reasons. I caught David doing Roman's laundry, resulting in a few articles of clothing going missing. This one irritated me because I made my son do his own laundry. I asked him not to do this, but his excuse was that he was trying to save water. I don't know how to fight him since it's his house. I am terrified to bring this up to my sister. Am I reading into things too much? Am I silly for worrying that he might have ulterior motives? If I tell my sister and she gets angry, and nothing is going on, she'll kick us out, and we'll be homeless. My sister's creepy child-loving boyfriend has a crush on my son. In the past 4 days, I spoke with my sister Sarah, her boyfriend David, and my son Roman, all separately. One went well, 2 didn't. I have a lot to get off my chest, so this might be long. My first conversation was with my son. Roman adamantly denied that David ever did anything to him. He seemed surprised that I asked. He said he would have told me if he had. I believe him. I know he could be lying, but I'm trying to take his word for it. My son and I have a very open and transparent relationship. The first time my ex-husband ever verbally abused him, he came straight to me and told me about it. My guard is up, but I have to give him the benefit of the doubt. I didn't bring up the bedroom or laundry situation. But I was honest with him and told him that David's behavior toward him was inappropriate. We had a talk about boundaries, saying no, consent, etc. I drilled into him that David is not to drive him anywhere, text him anymore, or be around him alone under any circumstances. I also explained what grooming is, and that it's what David has been doing to him. He said he knew about it through a school assembly. Then, he said something that broke my heart. He apologized for letting David treat him that way, that he shouldn't have fallen for it, his exact words. I assured him that none of it was his fault. I want to make it clear that David is not preying on him because of how he looks or how he acts. He is doing it because he is a predator and they prey on the vulnerable. Honestly, the conversation had left him a little shell-shocked. To know that the person you liked and trusted isn't who you thought he was would leave any kid rattled. For the entire rest of the night, he followed me around like a lost puppy. It did break my heart a little, to see him like that, but I don't want him to feel a false sense of security around David, so I have no regrets about it. Sarah was next. I knew it. Would turn into an argument before the conversation even began. It's always been that way with her. My sister is nice but not kind. She'll take you in off the street but then throw it back in your face if you cross her. So I knew what I was getting into, but I had to do it not only for my kid's sake but for hers. This is not a man I want her to be with or have children with, nor do I want him in our family. I told her that I was uncomfortable with the way David acts around Roman and that I think it's a lot deeper than what he portrays it to be. I mentioned that I didn't like the gift giving and the constant texting, and I brought up the bedroom and laundry incidents. As I predicted, she was more offended that I was accusing her boyfriend of grooming my son. She didn't see how that was proof of anything. Do you know how many socks and pairs of underwear I've lost while doing laundry? It's probably stuck somewhere in the dryer. The more I expressed my concerns, the more defensive she got. She thinks I'm manic, essentially. She said that as soon as things get good for me, roof over my head, food in the fridge, a steady job, I intentionally screw it up because deep down, I don't think I deserve happiness. She tries to help me every time, but I end up poking her in the back like I am right now. So, she doesn't believe me. That's her prerogative, fine. I told her that I wouldn't be staying at her house much longer and that I didn't want David around my kid anymore, that we'd be keeping to ourselves for the rest of my short time here. She's letting me stay, surprisingly, but she said she's glad to see me go. She swore up and down that David would never hurt Roman, and that she was sad to see their relationship ruined over an accusation with no real basis. That I shouldn't let my self-destructive behavior and my bipolar paranoia get in the way of other people's happiness. And that I better not accuse her boyfriend of being a predator anymore. She kept shifting the blame onto me, so I ended it there. Oh, and she told me that she wants reimbursement for things like clothing and grocery shopping, because apparently we are draining her wallet with buying so much food. Yes, an 8th grader going through a growth spurt eats a lot. Shocker. But I apologized and said I'd buy his and my groceries from now on. David came back from his church retreat Friday morning, which is when I confronted him. I was very upset, so I didn't go easy on him. He was thrown off by my hostility, but once he understood what I was implying, his demeanor shifted. Sit down, let's talk about it, he kept saying, except he was the one who was nervous and looked like he was on the brink of a panic attack. I kept my composure. I asked him why he was in my son's room in the middle of the night with the door shut. He gave me the same excuse that he was looking for his cell phone. I asked him why he couldn't have gone for it in the morning. He said that he set the alarm to 5 a.m. for work and that he didn't want it to go off with my son in the room and wake him up. I asked him why he was standing over my son's bed. He admitted that he was trying to wake him up and asked him if he'd seen his phone. Did he not just say that he didn't want the alarm to wake him up? I asked him what on earth would compel him to think it is okay to wake up my child in the middle of the night to help him look for a cell phone. He said he wasn't thinking straight and that he was sorry. I asked him about the missing laundry as well. He adamantly denied what I was implying. He said that his and my sister's clothing gets lost in the laundry all the time. That he would help me find my son's missing clothing. All while apologizing profusely. I'll admit I was thrown off by how apologetic he was, and it made me a little soft. I thanked him for letting us stay in his house and apologized for not setting boundaries earlier, but I told him that from now on, I didn't feel comfortable with him being around my son. No more driving him places, buying him gifts, texting him, helping him with homework, doing his laundry, etc. I told him that he was no longer allowed to be alone with my son or touch his things under any circumstances. He broke down in tears. He was hysterical. The thought of me believing that he was preying on my son made him miserable. That he'd never do that, he said. I love him like a father loves a son. When reading my original post, a lot of you believed the same thing at first. So did I, but I just don't like how David looks at him. Yes, I see the kindness in his eyes toward my son as he helps him with homework or watches a show with him, but there is a nuance of something covetous and sinister that I can't shake off. Anyway, I told him that it's unhealthy for him to be so fixated on a child and that he cannot depend on my kid for happiness. I told him that we'd be leaving very soon, more on that later. I didn't tell him where or when it was happening. He asked if there was anything he could do to rectify the situation. He suggested that the four of us sit down and talk about it. I declined. I reiterated that he is not allowed near my kid anymore and left it at that. A small part of me felt I was too harsh on him. Maybe he was just looking for his phone. Maybe it's a coincidence that articles of clothing are missing. But he was on his knees, sobbing like I had just pulled the rug out from underneath him. For a child he hasn't known for that long. I don't think he was devastated that I'd accused him of being a predator. He was devastated that I revoked his access to my child. I'm not stupid. I once witnessed this man argue with my sister, brutal, verbal assaults from both sides, resulting in my sister crying. He didn't shed a tear. For my peace of mind, and yours, I have been watching Roman like a hawk. When I'm home, he's with me. When I'm not home, he's at a trusted friend's house, or again, with me. I actually took him to work with me this morning, which he wasn't thrilled about, but whatever. I made him block David's number, of course. We haven't been in the house since Friday, but as some of you suggested, I will sleep in his room at night instead of making him sleep in my room. I'll be honest, I decided to hold off on drug testing him, because I really do not think David has been drugging him. My son is naturally a heavy sleeper and has always had issues waking up for school, even before we moved into my sister's house. I checked his text messages, and from what I've seen, he's never texted David at night. He's usually up texting his friends in a group chat. I purchased a nanny cam, specifically the one where you can watch the footage on your smartphone. I wasn't expecting it to be so pricey. I ordered them on Wednesday, and they are due to arrive tonight or Monday morning. I'll put it in my son's room and review it every day. I'm really nervous because there's a possibility that I'll see something odious and I don't know if I can handle that. We have been staying at a motel for the weekend, now that David has returned from his church retreat. I wasn't taking any chances. $56 a night, and a little sketchy, but I don't want to complain. Again, despite the situation, his mood has been a lot better than mine has. He thinks a motel is the same as a hotel, so to him, it's like we're on a mini vacation. It's mind-blowing how kids can be so resilient, even in the most unnerving situations. Update 2. My sister's creepy child-loving boyfriend has a crush on my son. Things were more darker than I thought. I have both bad news and good, really good, news. I guess I'll start off by saying that my son and I weren't in the house much, up until Friday of this week. We've been staying at a local motel that's decently close to his school and where I work. But since we weren't at the house, things sort of escalated a bit. David's number is blocked on Roman's phone, but he found him on TikTok and Instagram on Monday night and messaged him there. Nothing explicit in the messages, just things like, "Did you block my number? I really miss talking to you, is everything okay? Maybe in the future, we can talk to each other again. I'm sorry if I upset you or your mom. Are you and your mom safe? Where are you staying? Respond to me when you get a moment. I have something important to tell you." And many more like that, just in begging my son for a conversation. I was livid when my son showed me. What set me off the most is that I know David messaged him because he thought my kid would respond without telling me. He thinks they have some secret, private relationship right under my nose that I'm interfering with. I'm pretty sure that's why he hasn't kicked me out of his house. He's not mad, just miserable and desperate for some sort of contact. I feel like no matter how hard I pull my son away from David, he's refusing to let go. We blocked the Instagram and TikTok accounts immediately, and I screenshotted the messages. I'm trying to keep a record of everything. I asked Roman to delete his Snapchat account, just in case, but he didn't want to do that. I'm 99% sure he has a girl on there that he likes. I let that slide because he came straight to me about the other accounts, and he agreed not to add any new accounts on Snapchat or post anything that gave away our location for the time being. This entire ordeal upset my son. He broke down in tears when he returned from school the next day. That hurt a lot to see. I don't know if I expressed this, but Roman genuinely liked David, and they got along well. Maybe my kid saw him as a father figure since he was shunned and neglected by my ex-husband. I think I underestimated the mental toll it would take on him from having to cut David off completely and then block him when he reached out privately. Someone noted that I should get him into therapy soon. I plan on doing that once we are securely living on our own and I find the money for it. It's definitely a priority. David's harassment spilled over to me, too. He called me multiple times and texted me things like, "Let me know when you're back so we can resolve this. Am I allowed to attend Roman's baseball game on Thursday with you? I'd like to support him. Can you please answer? I'd really love to talk, just us. I'm sorry if I gave you both the wrong impression." I didn't block his number on my phone. I figured that the more he talked, the more likely he'd continue to incriminate himself and I could use his words against him. I didn't answer a single one of his questions, but I let him know that if he contacted my kid ever again or if he showed up to his school or any events that I'd go straight to the police. And that's not an empty threat, either. Unbeknownst to him, I am getting the police involved because I now have solid evidence that this man has a sick obsession with my child. This is the bad news. I mentioned that I plan to set up a camera in Roman's room. I asked for his permission first, and he said he didn't care since we were barely in the house anymore. The camera I chose is motion sensitive and links the footage to my iPhone so that I can watch it anywhere. The camera was set up on Sunday night as soon as I received the package, and I hid it above the doorframe so that it overlooked the entire room. You can't see it unless you use a ladder. I didn't get anything for a couple of days. I was randomly notified of movement in the room but saw nothing when I looked at the footage. But on Wednesday evening, at around 6, David came into my son's room, stood there momentarily, and then left, no longer than a minute. An hour-ish later, he returned and started going through his drawers. He picked up a specific garment and left within less than 2 minutes. I wanted to throw up. I didn't sleep that entire night at the motel. The following day, I had someone cover my shift, which allowed me to do a deep search of David's room while he was at work and my son was at school. I found the article of clothing inside of his pillowcase, on top of the pillow, right where he would lay his head to rest at night. I was so sick to my stomach that it took me almost 2 hours to confiscate that article of clothing and check it for evidence. I won't elaborate, but you can infer what I mean. I was nauseated the entire time. All I could do was put on gloves, throw them into a Ziploc bag, and shove it into my closet. I didn't want to look at it or even think about it. I still don't. That answers the question of why David was so insistent on doing my kids' laundry. Who knows how long this has been going on? I've been ruminating on the next steps to take. Besides my main priority, going to the police, my other priority is telling my sister Sarah. We are obviously not on the best terms right now. She found out that I confronted her boyfriend last week, and she is livid. How dare I accuse him of grooming my son? Apparently, he's not the same man he was after we left, and returned to his old habits. He was back to going to bars with his friends every evening. His drinking got worse. He had stopped coming home early from work and dragged himself through the door at almost midnight, if he even bothered coming home, that is. And he was no longer affectionate toward her. Apparently, it's my fault he's depressed again. If those aren't red flags, I don't know what is. I can't tell if she is in denial, or if she can't actually see them. But what she's most concerned about is that David hasn't been home since Thursday. He went to work, came home briefly, then left again without telling her when he'd be back. In my head, that makes sense. He knows that either she or I took the garment that was inside of his pillowcase, and now he's afraid to come home. It confirms all of my suspicions. I will tell my sister everything, though, probably tonight or tomorrow. I have no idea how to go about it, and I guess I'm nervous about her reaction. She's still convinced that I'm having a manic episode. I was diagnosed with bipolar 1 many years ago, and I take medication to manage it. If I go off of my meds, my mania will progressively get worse until I spiral into psychosis. So her concerns are valid. I put her through a lot back when I wasn't stable, but that's not the current case for me right now. I have tangible proof and video proof of her boyfriend being a creep. I can bring up the camera footage, but then I have the issue of not getting either of their consent to put a camera in their house, and I don't know how well that would go over with her, even if it was for a good reason. I just know that if I were in her shoes, I would be grateful that my boyfriend, potential fiancé, was outed as a predator before I got engaged to him. She's pretty much past the age of having children, but has plans to adopt in the distant future, so I have to tell her, somehow. My son and I have been back in the house since Friday night. My sister still isn't kicking me out, but she doesn't want me here anymore. She's made that very clear. The only reason why I haven't packed our things and left is because, again, David is gone. He won't tell anyone his whereabouts and has turned off his location on his phone, according to my sister. She thinks he might be crashing on a friend's couch, something he's done multiple times in the past. I think he knows I'm onto him. But his absence means that I can stay at the house for now. I'm still watching my kid like a hawk and staying hyper-vigilant. Still sleeping in his room, taking him to work with me, etc. I can live with the hostility from my sister as long as he is safe, especially since we won't be here for much longer. Which leads me to the good news. I got approved for public housing. I won't share too many details, but I will share the most important one. We'll get to move in a little over 3 weeks. Update 3. My sister's creepy child-loving boyfriend has a crush on my son. In my last update, I left off with David's disappearance after I found out what he did with my son's clothing and confiscated it. It turns out that David was not on the run, missing, or crashing on a friend's couch. He holed up at his parents' house and is still currently there. My sister informed me that due to my accusations of him grooming my son, David had a mental health crisis. She hopes I'm happy with myself, and she feels the need to stay with him for support. So, in other words, he's hiding at his parents' house because either the guilt is getting to him, or he's scared. Or both. His entire family is infuriated with me. Whatever story he's feeding them is making me look insane in their eyes. Not once did they ask me for my side of the story. After I went to the police, my sister made the decision to kick me out of her home. I saw it coming a mile away, so I'm not too upset by it. I just wish she didn't feel such fierce loyalty to him and his family. I don't even know how to explain to my kid that his aunt doesn't support him. She does know I was approved for housing, and that I have no other place for our belongings at the moment, so she at least has the decency to let us keep our stuff there until we can fully move out. I guess that counts for something. Not much else to say about that. I've just been trying to keep my distance. David's behavior, though, got so much worse during this mental health crisis. The harassment escalated to stalking, under the guise of wanting to clear the air. He showed up to Roman's baseball game that was held at a different school to try and speak with him. That means he found his schedule, the exact time he was playing, and the address of that school. Found the motel we'd been staying at. We had to move to a different one after this incident. Created 3 other Instagram profiles to message him about how this is all a misunderstanding, how much he misses him, etc. Some of these messages were awful. Things like don't let other people make decisions for you, and you're old enough to decide who should be in your life and who shouldn't. Paragraphs and paragraphs of him pouring his heart out to my son, and begging him not to tell me that he's been reaching out. This harassment has left my son completely disillusioned. After screenshotting everything, I asked him not to read the messages anymore and to just delete them. At that point, I wanted to take his phone away, but I knew he'd resent me for that. Maybe I made the wrong decision, maybe I didn't. I don't know. The day David found our motel was one of the most traumatic moments of my life. I don't know how he found us. My sister knows I've been staying at a motel, but I never told her which one. On that day, It was about 9 p.m., and I needed to go to the corner store to grab something. My son was taking a shower and getting ready for bed, as he had school the next day. The corner store was a minute's walk away. The room we were staying in was visible from the windows of the store. I'd made this quick trip countless times. At the moment, I didn't feel unsafe leaving my kid behind, but hindsight is always 20/20. I already feel stupid, no need to tell me. David had parked at the lot across the street, and I didn't see his car. He waited until I was almost at the store and my back was fully turned to go for our motel room door. It was obviously locked, so he started knocking, but by then I had already heard him and was running in his direction. I nearly blacked out from the fear and adrenaline, and it's hard to remember much. I recall that he didn't seem angry, he just had this miserable, panicked look in his eyes. He really did look like someone who was going through a mental health crisis. I told him I was calling the police and that he needed to leave. He said that he was entitled to a conversation with me, but he ran off once he saw me dialing 911. To me, his reasoning is bullshit. He keeps saying that he wants a conversation and to clear the air with me, but if that were true, then why didn't he approach me? He knew I wasn't in the room. Why did he essentially try to break in, where he knew my son was alone? I of course documented this incident with the police, which I will get into right now. On Monday, March 27th, the day after my last update and days before the aforementioned events occurred, I went to the police for the first time. The police officer I spoke with sat me down and gave me the opportunity to talk about everything, how David was very close with Roman, what I caught him doing with his clothes, the messages, etc. Thank God for these posts, because I found myself referring back to them. Memory can be unreliable. I presented the evidence that I had as well. I showed the video footage and gave her the article of clothing I confiscated, as well as the text messages and Instagram and TikTok messages. She then told me she would contact the district attorney, which she did soon after. I was shocked by how fast the process was moving, and she told me that since it involves the potential sexual abuse of a minor, they don't want to waste any time. I was interviewed again by a detective, and a couple days later, they called David in for an interview. By then, the stalking had begun. During my second interview, I showed him the new messages David sent, and told him about how David showed up to the school and the motel. I don't know what they asked David during his interview, but I can imagine that he denied everything and spun up a web of lies to try and make me look crazy. I'm not really concerned about him, though. With all of the evidence I have, David should be very, very nervous. A detective interviewed my son as well. This is what worried me the most, and I insisted that if they didn't have to do it, I'd rather they didn't question him at all. But they said it would help build a stronger case, and I trust them. I was told I had to be there during his interview, since he is a minor. Roman only knows about the stalking and harassment, but he has no idea about what David did with his clothes, and I want to keep it that way for as long as I can. I personally asked the detective not to bring it up. I'd just like to shield him from it all. They asked my son about the messages and the stalking, as well as their relationship. When asked about any physical contact they had, Roman brought something up that he didn't initially tell me about. He said there was one instance when he and David were in the living room watching a show called Stranger Things. David randomly placed his hand on my son's chest, left it there for a moment, then said, "I'm glad you're alive." I don't really know what to make of that, but combined with everything else he's done, it's very disturbing. I asked my son about it afterward, and he said that he didn't tell me because it didn't make him feel uncomfortable. As an isolated event, I guess it could seem like an innocent act to a 13-year-old, so I understand why he didn't bring it up, but I don't know. All I can do is take his word for it. In terms of the case, they are now requesting a warrant of arrest with the clerk of the court. If this is granted, then David will be arrested and charged with lewd and lascivious behavior, harassment, and stalking. He could end up getting up to 5 years in prison, maybe even more since a minor is involved. So that's where I'm at right now, waiting for the clerk's decision. The waiting game is stressful, but I'm trying to focus on the positives as much as I can. It's nice to see how fast the police and detectives are working and how serious they are taking my case. All I can do is trust that the outcome will be in my favor. After the interviews, all of David's harassment stopped. Good thing, too. Stalking and harassment of a minor is a felony, and I'm sure knowing that. The police are onto him scared him. I'm not naive enough to feel safe, though. I filed a petition for a protective order after the motel incident. I've been feeling paranoid, not a good feeling for someone who's bipolar, and having a lot of anxiety lately. Always looking over my shoulder, flinching when I see a stranger who looks like him, etc. I'm entitled to a conversation with you, he said when he tried to break into my motel room, but I didn't believe him. I think David believes he's entitled to unrestrained access to my child due to their prior relationship. The entitlement is what scares me the most, that someone can just take something because they feel like it belongs to them. I'm scared to go anywhere with my kid. Anytime he goes to school, I fear that it will be the last time I see him. It hasn't sunk in yet that my situation has developed into this. It's been difficult for me to wrap my head around where David's sudden attachment stemmed from. I was under the impression that predators are in general weird around children, but he never acted this way around other children, only mine. When he started dating my sister, she told me that David didn't want kids, and she was trying to convince him to change his mind. That's why she was so happy to see him and my son bond. Someone previously commented that in David's mind, he might believe that there's a legitimate romantic connection between him and my son. I don't know if there's any validity to that, and the idea of looking into it makes me nauseous. I'd rather not speculate and just pray that he gets arrested soon. The biggest drawback is that all of this has significantly disturbed our quality of life. I know that my kid is putting on a brave face, but he's not doing well. It's getting to him, and I knew it would, but actually seeing this siphon his happiness away is gut-wrenching. He's still doing fine at school, still eagerly partaking in sports and spending time with his friends, but every once in a while, he'll do the 1,000-yard stare, his eyes bereft of any sort of awareness, dissociation, maybe? He used to eat a ton, but he hasn't been finishing his food lately. He constantly says he doesn't feel well. I can't afford therapy right now, but I spoke with his school counselor, and they want to start weekly meetings with him to check in, which my son was not thrilled about, as he does not want to bring any of this up at school. He is very open with me about his feelings and we do talk about everything that's been going on, but there's only so much I can do. He needs a professional.
I talk to my girlfriend while she's asleep. I decided to start doing what I call expressing my love to my sleeping beauty. About a month after getting with her, I started to say sweet, cute things to her while she was asleep, telling her how much I love her and how I want to marry her. I soon realized she was pretending to be asleep, but that didn't discourage me. I kept talking to her, and I came across her Reddit post about me talking to her while she was sleeping. I told her I've always known that she was pretending, I just loved her too much to stop. This all happened months ago, and whenever I get the chance I still talk to her. She's just so beautiful when she sleeps, I can't help it. I love this girl so much.
A guy broke up with me because my favorite rapper is Left Eye, so I have been going out with a guy, Derek, who is 22 years old. We've only gone out 2 times and each date went fine. Not great, not bad, it was more like, well, we enjoy each other's company, so we'll see where this goes. Both dates we went Dutch. We never slept with each other either, as I'm not the type of girl to sleep on the first date. On the third date he took me out to an Israeli restaurant and said that this time he will pay for the both of us, which made me think that he really likes me and is finally showing signs of chivalry. Somewhere halfway through our meal, he asked me who my favorite rapper was. I replied Left Eye. He abruptly stopped eating and said, "You like that crazy woman?" I said yes, and what about it? He replied, "If she's your fave, then how do I know you won't burn my house down?" I was stunned. I said, "You do know she did that because he cheated on her, right? Are you saying you'll cheat on me?" He said that the cheating part is irrelevant, that it's the fact that she burned his house down. So I asked him who is his favorite rapper and he said Dr. Dre. That's where I asked, "So how do I know you won't push me down the stairs or beat me?" And he in all seriousness said that just because he listens to Dr. Dre doesn't mean he's a woman abuser. I just asked the waiter if they could wrap my food up to go and I left the restaurant. Right before I left, he said that he's glad he never had intimacy with me and that I'll be lucky enough to end up with some beta beach. I had enough and kicked him in the ballsack. As he was writhing in pain, I told him to never disrespect Left Eye before I left. Women of Reddit, what is your worst nice guy experience? I forgot my wallet while standing in line at the cafe. I ordered and realized my wallet missing, so I said I'll just zip out to my car and pay when I got back. I was parked right outside. This guy behind me says he'll pay for my drink, and I tried insisting I would pay, but he pulled out cash and paid before I could really do anything. I said thank you and chatted while waiting for my drink. I was on my way somewhere, so as I'm leaving he leaves too and asks if he can have my number. I was honest and said I was on my way to see my boyfriend. This guy just effing snaps, grabs my coffee, throws it across the street and tells me I'm leading him on and I'm a effing B, and then he storms off. I just went to my car and got my wallet and bought my own coffee. The owner saw the whole thing and told me he's now banned from the cafe. Apparently he'd done similar shit with other women and this was the last straw.
Entitled Mom Tries to Steal My Baby. One afternoon after our mommy and me yoga class, I know sounds dumb, but a great way to meet mommy friends, me and BB, my daughter, decided to get a coffee and catch up. While I would get coffee, she would get milk. Well, BB, lightweight that she is, passes out after that milk. I decide to be wild and get that second cup of coffee. I'm drinking my second cup of coffee when a wild entitled mom and her child appear. Mom says, "Aw, baby." I smile but go back to reading the news and sipping my coffee. When I look up, the child is trying to pick up my sleeping baby. I panicked, obviously, and yelled at her to stop. The mom says, "Oh, she wasn't hurting her." The child whines and asks for the baby and I say, "She's sleeping, and you're too little to hold her, honey, she's heavy." The mom just tells me to let her child hold the baby and I tell her no again. The mom says, "You don't have to be a jerk." I then ask excuse me while the child tries to pick up BB and woke her up, which makes BB cry. I pick her up and start hushing her. I tell her to leave us alone and the mother tries to grab BB and I turn away while BB is crying. The mom keeps trying to grab my baby and I fight back. At this point the coffee shop employees jump in and pull her away. One of them says that they called the police. The mom's nose is hurt and her child is sobbing. I feel bad for the kid, she's little, but her mom should teach her better. The employees ask us to stay and wait for police. The mom starts accusing me of hurting her and scaring her child. While this happened, BB is still crying, so I start to feed her. The mom then accuses me of exposing myself to a child and calling me a pedo. I ignore her, and BB finally calms down. The police came. and asked us each what happened. She claims I exposed myself to her daughter and hurt her. I was afraid that I was going to go to jail, so I told them that she tried to steal my baby and I was just protecting her. Luckily the coffee place had cameras. She got arrested for attempted kidnapping. I have to go to court for it next month. We go to court on April 14th for the criminal charges against the mom for attempted kidnapping. I didn't expect to update before then, but then this happened. Me and BB went to the park this morning. We got back around 11 a.m. There was a man standing on our porch, looking lost. BB was in her stroller sleeping. I put my hand in my purse, and onto my mace. I asked what I could help him with and the man said he was looking for me to deliver an envelope. I tell him it's me and I take the envelope and as soon as it is in my hands, he rips off his fake mustache and hat and reveals his identity as a legal intern. He then tells me I'm being sued. Yep, that's right, I'm being sued by the mother. Why would the woman who tried to snatch my baby be suing me? How much damage could I have inflicted? Well, apparently I did 25,000 USD in damage. In this poor envelope was about 10 million pages detailing how she is suing me for everything that is wrong in her life. Apparently I had broken her nose, so she's suing me for not only related medical bills, but she also wants me to pay for them to fix her pre-existing toed nose. Oh, and of course emotional damages to her and her child. Apparently the mom has anxiety and depression because of me. The kid has PTSD from the incident. Finally, I'm also being sued for slander and character assassination because how dare I say she tried to steal my baby. Of course at the end she said she would be willing to settle out of court if I would drop the criminal charges. Well, I took that letter to my lawyer and he said the judge would laugh her out of court, especially if the criminal trial goes in our favor, which is basically guaranteed.
What would you do in this situation?
Girlfriend is flying all the way across the country to see another guy. My girlfriend and I are both in our mid-20s and we've been dating between 1 to 2 years. About a month into dating, I found some texts exchanged between her and her old friend with the contact name, attractive foreign athlete, that pretty much went along these lines.
Long time no see. I want to go to Vegas and have fun like we did last summer.
Let's hang in Vegas then. Do you want to wrestle when we get there?
Well, I just started dating someone.
Come on, he doesn't even have to know it happened.
Guess I'll visit you as single then.
Since he lives across the country they text each other once every few weeks, just dumb small talk. About a month ago, he said he wants her to come see him and she dropped everything, stopped talking about all of her money problems, and bought a plane ticket. She leaves in a couple weeks. She is very well aware that I'm not a big fan of this guy, but she doesn't really seem to care. She assures me that nothing is happening between them and has not once asked me how I feel about this whole thing. What would you do in my situation?
You gain the ability to stop time. What do? I would become a effing anarchy god. Here's how. Step 1. I would learn everything. Assuming the internet doesn't work because the electricity is frozen with time, I would read and memorize every book. I would also document the nature and laws of time being frozen. Let's assume anything inanimate I directly touch becomes unfrozen. Clothes, doors, air, etc. not people. Step 2. Get the media after me. I would do this by auditioning for AGT. I would use my various skills to work my way up the chain until the final round. While waiting between auditions I would cause minor havoc, like unexplainable things disappearing. In the final round I pretend I'm going to be singing. I sing horribly and midway I stop abruptly and cut the music. This is an act, and I am the judge. Lights cut and all doors locked. Security is placed elsewhere. All cameras are forced on me with a spotlight. So tell me, Earth, can you win the golden buzzer? I make a golden star button appear in my hand. Or will you become another victim? You have 1 year. I freeze time and watch as everything unfolds on TV. Everyone freaks out. Some say it's the end of times. Others say it's all a hoax. Regardless, I'm not a top story yet. So I wait until the Prime Minister gives a speech. I appear in the background behind the important figure for long enough to be noticed, but disappear before security catches me. I leave behind a golden star sticker where I was standing. Step 3. I wait 6 months. Every time there are doubts, I break the left arm of someone and put a golden star sticker on it. The left arm is meant to throw people off. As time goes on towards the 6-month mark, the arm breakings become less frequent and people slowly calm down. But on the 6-month mark, I kill another higher power and leave a golden star sticker on their head. Step 4. I wait until the day before the 1-year mark. Other than the occasional left arm break, I stop all activity. The day before the 1-year mark I watch as people become scared. Then, at exactly 4 p.m., I kill all of the world leaders, prime ministers, the Pope, etc. Everyone wonders what worse I will do on the next day. Step 5. The day of the 1-year mark. Countries are in a defensive position. Media is in hysterics. Civilians are unable to remain calm. 4 p.m. approaches and I hack every computer so everyone is watching me as I stand on the White House's roof and speak, holding a golden star button. Well, hello again, Earth. It's been a year and I have finally made my decision about your planet. Pause for a good 10 seconds while smiling maniacally and hovering over the button. Suddenly I press it. You've won a prize. Meet your new leader. I then disappear and the White House is covered in golden star stickers. I wait for another week and kill anyone who tries to enter a prime minister position. Step 6. 1 week later I bring about the next major step in my plan. I collect the world's smartest people and force them to work for me. Of course, I give them astounding living conditions and make them feel more inclined to work. I have them create immortality. After I gain immortality I kill the scientists. Step 7. Wait. I wait for everyone to mostly forget me, to the point where some are uncertain of my existence. Many years. I still make sure there's no global destruction or mass death, but overall I stay hidden. Step 8. The reveal. I claim to be a goddess wanting to help humans. After showing people all the good I can do, I make it so they worship me. I have everyone advance space travel and invent ways for me to obtain godlike powers. I become a literal god that can create and destroy whatever whenever. But what about when I get tired of living? What if I want to die? Eternal sleep. My annoying nephew tore apart my vintage Marvel poster signed by Stan Lee. My sister didn't even apologize, so I sued her and made her pay for the repair. My sister brought her kids over 2 weeks ago. In my office, I have a vintage Marvel poster signed by Stan Lee and the artist of the poster. The poster is over 30 years old. Her son saw this and thought it was really neat and wanted me to give it to him. I tried being diplomatic but let him know that wouldn't happen. For certain reasons, my office door locks behind me. The next day, we're going to the park and I can't find my keys. We're looking around the house and I hear her daughter yell out, "Oh no," and my sister and I go running. Her son opened my office and climbed on the desk to get the poster down. In doing it, he managed to tear it in half. I'm furious. This poster is not only irreplaceable, I got it signed by my now deceased grandfather. It has a lot of sentimental value for me. My sister completely blew this off. Hell, she even started giggling when her daughter said "oh no" the second time because she thought it sounded cute. She didn't offer me anything, even an apology. Her argument is that I should have had my keys on me, because I should have somehow expected that her son would try to take it down from the wall. Dad and wife are firmly in my camp. Dad recognized how important this was to me because it was only a few days before my grandfather suddenly passed away, and was the last thing we did together. My mom and sister are acting like it's no big deal. Sister ghosted me when I texted her asking about compensating me for the poster. We had the poster appraised at $3,000 due to the condition and rarity of this particular poster. I was informed after Stan Lee's death. It went up but we didn't have it reappraised. This particular one does go on eBay and is unsigned, fetching north of $2,000. When I served her, my mom called me up telling me it was no big deal. She said she found another poster on eBay, and when I saw the link I realized it was completely different, and wasn't signed. It wasn't even the same year. Now my sister is complaining to our mom that I'm being mean for going after her, and not taking her offer and instead making her pay for it. She thinks I should just let this go because kids will be kids. Update: Mom is now in my corner. We hadn't really spoken about this much as I was pretty angry about things. She didn't realize that it was this one particular poster and she knew how much it meant to me. Right now she's trying to convince my sister of the seriousness of this. My sister responded to the filling. Her argument is basically it's really mean that he's coming after me for a poster. I offered to buy him another one but he said no. So I shouldn't have to pay anything. I've heard from Dad that her husband is trying to convince her that this isn't going to go well for her, and to come to a resolution. It's not even a money thing. She does well and I'm not trying to destroy her. The reality of this is setting in for my sister. Her husband contacted me last night asking about repair costs and what I thought was fair compensation for this. He was really apologetic about this right now. I told him that it wasn't even a money thing for me, it was my sister's behavior towards me about this. It's what the poster symbolizes for me. We did the court appearance via video conference. Judge was not hearing any of my sister's hemming and hawing about this. I was expecting to get the repair costs. They weren't cheap, that's for sure. I had 2 estimates, and she didn't want to pay either. The judge had to tell her straight out, offering to replace something with an appraised value that it had with something that isn't even in the same ballpark is unacceptable. I got the full appraised value as the judge considered it the cost of replacement. Sister more or less cut the call as fast as she could. I got a call from her husband again asking if I wanted to check. Later that night my sister called me and finally apologized for her and my nephew's behavior. I told her I'm okay with it now but she needs to understand why I'm so angry. She said she finally did when the judge laid it out. I guess this is it for this one. Not the best outcome but an outcome. I figure I'll get the poster back from repair early next year. My wife found out about my spontaneity prompts. Honestly, you are doing exactly what she said she wanted. Not only that, you followed through on it because you care about her and your relationship to make the effort on your own to be a loving spouse. If she is expecting you to whip these things up off the top of your head, she has a very unrealistic view of relationships and what her expectations should be in a spouse. Not everyone can come up with one romantic idea, never mind the amount you are doing. That's a fairy tale and for the movies. You're not just her husband, you are a person. I would have a talk and say you are not her. You don't think, feel like her, you don't experience life like her, you don't feel love or express your love like her. The method on how you get yourself to remember to do what you want to do for her is not up to her. I also know women have a huge insecurity when it comes to relationships. There's a fear that their low self-esteem is correct and are not worth the effort for romance by their partners. This is why women get so upset. When the man doesn't put effort to elevate her above normal life in his heart and actions, we can feel no more special than a bologna sandwich. Each one is very much loved by the same and so greatly appreciated, but we want to see we are more than a bologna sandwich. You are doing that, and she needs to accept it graciously and happily that you have taken her concerns seriously and made steps to ensure you're meeting that. She was happy with it. Now she knows how you remember it's not good enough. She needs to have a long talk with her brain and feelings. Am I the jerk for telling my girlfriend that we're done if she doesn't want another kid in the future? Background: I'm 28 with no kids. My girlfriend is 26 and has an 8-year-old son from her previous relationship. She was with the guy since they were kids, but when she got pregnant, he dropped the ball. She had it pretty hard during the early years and it was a huge struggle for her to balance work, school and her son. She made it work and is now in law school. The kid's dad made a change about 3 years back when his own father died and has since been helping. We've been together for a year and 2 months and I really do love her. However, when we first got together she did mention that she doesn't see herself having other kids because it was incredibly hard. She values her time alone when her kid is away, and she wants to travel with her son being that he's bigger now. Also that she has a school-age kid and doesn't want to start over with an infant. We were too early for me to complain about it or try to change her mind. It wasn't brought up again for some time. Fast forward to last night, we were watching something and I mentioned that my coworker has left work to have her 4th kid. She said that she couldn't imagine having that many kids. I got a little offended being that my parents had 5. She told me that that's what worked for my parents, but it wouldn't work for her. I asked why and she listed the reasons above and that 4 kids is just excessive. I tried to reason it down to 3 or even 2. She said she doesn't want any children but her son. The way I see it, the only reason it was so hard was because of her age when she first had him. My logic is that any future children we produce will be secure and she won't be alone or have to struggle. For background, I have 4 siblings while she has one sister who lives in another state. She doesn't understand how important siblings are. I told her if she's unwilling to have even one child for me in the future then we're done. She agreed and said we're done then, and I'm incredibly hurt. This is a hill she's willing to die on. She's super smart, but so hard-headed. No matter what I said all night, she wouldn't hear it or budge her views at all. I'm hurt because I made the empty threat and she very easily went through with it. I'm not feeling valued at all. I love this woman and the thought of us having an expiration date kills me. I want to marry her and have kids with her and she's just uninterested. She also said I was being a jerk and not taking her experiences into account when I totally am. I acknowledge how hard it was for her, which is why I think she would have a totally different experience if she tried again. She's not 18 anymore and will have me by her side. I want her back but don't know what to say. She seemed very certain when she agreed to the breakup. Please tell me, am I the jerk? What's your worst gambling experience? I've been living alone in a new city for a little more than a year and know very few people outside of the workplace. With not much to do during my downtime, I got into online poker. I have a decent job where I make around 100K a year end. But over the last 7 months I've managed to lose 146K playing poker. I primarily played PLO6. I started with buy-ins of 100, but soon moved to 500 and then finally 5,000. I was losing often but only after I would run up insane scores. Similarly, every other day I would load up for 5K, run it up to 30K, proceed to lose it all, and then buy back 6 more times. I kept it mostly in balance with a couple of big cash outs, getting up from the table with, say, a 70K profit, only because everyone else left. But I was a consistent loser, losing on an average 30K, 40K per month. My entire salary would go into this, other than rent and food. The last week or so of every month I would be counting my dollars to make sure I had enough to make it through. And then it happened. I lost balance completely. Had a month where I lost 50K and 10K in one particular day. I was playing intoxicated that day, as I was already mad about losing. I blew through my savings, took an advance from work, then blew through that too. As of today I'm down 146K, with 12K in debt and about $200 to my name to last out the month. I don't have enough for rent this month and don't really know how I'm going to figure it out. I am respected at work and seen as someone who is highly logical, analytical, practical and intelligent. What they don't know is that I'm also a degenerate gambler. I'm sure I'll get through this. I have too. And I have to rebuild. Take care guys. Loneliness is a hell of a thing.
My son's friend's parents want to adopt him. I, 24 female, am a single mom to my son, Owen, 8. It's been just us since day one. His father isn't in the picture and has been able to avoid child support for years now. Yes, I've tried everything. My own parents disowned me. I had to drop out of high school and have worked a myriad of jobs since then to keep us afloat. We aren't on the poverty line by any means, but we definitely live paycheck to paycheck in a 1-bedroom apartment. It's not ideal and I hope within the next couple of years, we'll be someplace bigger. For now, it's our situation. I've raised Owen to know that money isn't everything. We may not have a lot. He won't always have the newest this or that, but we have each other. The two of us are very close. He has never gone without the basics, but I admit, he doesn't get a lot of fun extras. I try to save a little here and there to make birthdays and holidays fun, but it's still never anything glamorous and I think Owen was fine with that, until recently anyway. In our area, all the public schools are based on a lottery system, so your child has a fair shot of going to any of them, so long as you put in their name. Our neighborhood school is not great and in a pretty crappy area, so I decided to put him in a different one across town. It's near my job so it works out. Last year, when he was in 2nd grade, he met Charlie. They began hanging out a lot after school with Owen going to his place. I met Charlie's parents Nate and Paige a couple of times before this began. They seemed very nice and supportive. Owen always had a great time at their house. Charlie occasionally came to our apartment but usually they were at his place, which made sense because I work and there's really not much for them to do here, even when I am off. Summer breaks are easy to find care, as there are several free or low-cost camps that I can put Owen in. It's the shorter breaks such as Christmas and spring that are harder. Camp space is limited. Spring break of 2022 I managed to just miss registration. Paige is a stay-at-home mom and offered to take Owen for the week. I was hesitant to ask so much of her but she insisted. He had a really fun time with them. They did a ton of activities and Paige refused my attempts to pay her back at least some. I couldn't afford all, I admit. I did feel a tad uncomfortable with her spending this much on my son, but at the same time, I didn't want to deprive Owen of this stuff. Summer came and while I did get Owen into camp, he spent a ton of time with Charlie as well. He ended up going on vacation with them. I was again very hesitant, but the experience was something I could never give Owen and it wasn't too far away. He had a blast. I kept telling Nate and Paige that there's no way I could ever pay them back and they kept insisting that they loved having Owen around. They told me what a great kid he is. Sweet, respectful. At one point, I really pressed Paige as to why she was so insistent on having Owen around so much. That's when she told me that they never planned for Charlie to be an only child, but all attempts at giving him a sibling just didn't happen. They know that Owen will never make up for not having a brother, but if they can give him a consistent playmate so he's not lonely, they'll do it. Should this have been a red flag? Maybe, but at the same time I found it sweet that the boys considered each other brothers. I thought it was innocent. Surely Paige and Nate knew the truth, right? This continued for a bit, and come Christmas break of 2022, Paige and Nate insisted that I not even bother to try to get Owen into a camp. They'd take care of him for me. I was grateful. They ended up getting him more Christmas gifts than I did. I tried to set my pride aside because it was about Owen and not me. This is still when things finally started seeming off to me. I understood a gift on his birthday, and while they didn't get him as many gifts that they got Charlie, it was a lot more than you would typically get your kid's friend. Fast forward to now. Spring break was last week, and this time, Paige and Nate didn't just offer to take care of him during the day while I worked. They asked if Owen could spend the entire week at their house. Honestly, it meant I could pick up some more shifts and save up for the bike Owen wants for his birthday, so I said yes. I went to pick him up on Saturday afternoon. The kids were playing out back, so Nate and Paige asked to talk to me. They sat me down and said they love Owen and he's always such a joy to have. I thanked them profusely for all they'd done for him. Paige suggested that Owen stay a little longer. I pointed out Easter was Sunday plus school started up on Monday. They said they could take him to school. I felt weird and said no. It was time for Owen to come home. That's when Nate suggested that Owen stay with them long term. I could still see him, but they would take care of him. I thought they were joking and said, like what, you'd be his guardians or something? They got quiet and the reality rushed over me. I pointed out that this wasn't a movie. They can't just get custody. They started spouting some legal stuff about how I could assign them as guardians and they would help make this transition smooth. They told me to think about Owen and what's best for him. I told them there was no way I was going to give up my son. I grabbed Owen and we left. I've blocked their numbers. Owen has no clue what's going on. I'm keeping him home tomorrow and took the day off work to figure some stuff out. Legally, they can't take him, but now I know what they want and I'm terrified. I don't want him going back to that school. Do we move? I'm so lost and I feel so dumb because looking back, all the warning signs were there. I know Owen is going to be devastated losing Charlie, Paige, and Nate. How am I ever going to explain it to him?
Could my ex have been cheating on me? I am a 22-year-old woman who recently ended a relationship with my non-binary ex, who is also my boss. Let me explain the circumstances before jumping into the latest events. When I took a break from school due to financial aid issues, I worked as a private tutor for about a year and a half. During that time, I met my ex, and they helped me secure a job with the company they work for when I went back to school in the fall of 2022. Unfortunately, all my paychecks and training were managed through them, which is something I now realize was a red flag now that we're no longer together. Throughout our relationship, my ex had a habit of going on long motorcycle rides without communication, besides occasionally letting me know they were staying at their parents' house after drinking too much or being out late. Despite my concerns for their safety, they ignored my request to share their location during these rides. Over the last 6 to 12 months, my ex gradually pushed me towards polyamory. Eventually, I reached a breaking point and agreed to it in the final month of our relationship. Almost immediately, they introduced a third person into our dynamic. During this time, I fell ill with a fever of 102 and ended up vomiting while tears streamed down my face on the bathroom floor. Despite my condition, my ex took the new person upstairs and had intimacy with them. They had led me to believe they were just going to watch a movie and then take this person home. Discovering the truth the following morning was deeply painful. The breaking point came when I asked my ex not to engage in intimate activities while I was out, as I had been experiencing panic attacks since we became polyamorous, and I knew it would trigger another breakdown. They assured me they understood and agreed. However, just an hour later, while I was shopping with my 17-year-old sister, I received a text from my ex stating that they were going to have sex. This led to yet another breakdown, and I ended up calling my older brother for support and to help me devise a plan for leaving. We lived together, had rescue animals, and various shared responsibilities that needed to be sorted out. The next Wednesday, I moved in with my parents, who lived a few hours away. My ex, who is still my boss, retained possession of all our pets, except for my reptiles. Today, my ex reached out to me because they accidentally ran over a baby bunny while mowing the lawn and sought emotional support. They mentioned that someone they were talking to picked up the bunny to take it to an animal hospital. This revelation shattered me, as my ex had initially stated they would remain single for some time after our breakup. Learning that they had continued dating throughout the entire breakup made me question the significance of our 2-year relationship. Did it mean nothing to them? Did our shared experiences, such as living together, taking care of one another, and rescuing animals, hold no value? How could they move on so quickly? I feel utterly crushed. This situation brought back memories of my ex making advances towards my friends while intoxicated, always blaming it on alcohol. I also recall instances where I noticed random hickeys on my ex's body, yet was cajoled into believing that they came from me, dismissing my doubts as a result of my poor memory. Additionally, a former friend sent me screenshots of my ex's profile on Bumble when we were not yet polyamorous, only for my ex to claim it was an old account and that they no longer used the app. I questioned myself, was I going crazy? Were my suspicions accurate? Am I trust in my ex misguided? Am I inventing worst-case scenarios because I feel disposable in their eyes? This deep sense of hurt consumes me. My mother, in her anger, suggested feeding my ex to alligators today, but I am too overwhelmed to feel rage. I find myself spiraling, unable to escape the flood of emotions I've been avoiding since the breakup. For the past month, whenever these feelings resurfaced, I submerged myself in hours of TikTok and Final Fantasy XVI to distract myself. However, this new revelation has reawakened all the emotions I've been suppressing. My sleep has suffered, and I wake up after crying in my sleep. Fighting the temptation to return to my ex has required immense effort on my part, particularly since my parents aren't supportive, although that's a different issue. I feel worthless and unlovable. Am I losing my mind? Even before embracing polyamory, I had lingering suspicions of infidelity, but I chose to trust my partner and dismiss them as figments of my imagination. My mother-in-law installed a camera in my bedroom. My 33-year-old husband got into a car accident almost a month ago. He's been bedridden due to a back injury and I've been his primary caregiver. The pressure has been too much from my mother-in-law. She keeps telling me to take care of him and be there for him constantly. She begged me to take time off work and I did. She then asked me to send her hourly updates about his condition, but when I didn't she'd get mad and cause an issue. She visits every day but doesn't do anything to help. Alternatively, she'd list all the things I should or shouldn't do. The family keeps telling me she's just worried sick for her son, so I try to stay calm. Days ago, she called to berate me about not replacing the sheets quickly. I had no idea how she found out since my husband didn't call her. My sister-in-law called me to tell me that her mom installed a camera in my bedroom to see if I was taking proper care of her son. I was stunned. After searching the room I found the camera. I called my mother-in-law and had a huge fight with her. She admitted it and said she was just feeling concerned and wanted to make sure her son was being cared for. I yelled at her telling her that she's no longer allowed into my home after this. She lost it and went on a rant about how I'm stopping her from seeing her son and that not seeing him will literally make her sick herself. The family called me later to get me to back out of this decision, but I told them she breached my privacy and took advantage of the situation. They said I'm taking it too personally and that I can't blame a concerned mother for wanting to make sure her son's fine. I ended the conversation but my husband is upset, telling me I'm being vindictive and that if his mom can't come then he'll move in there with her. We argued, then I went outside and he's been silent ever since. What's the best example of the butterfly effect? Ahead of the 2004 election year, the Republican senator from Illinois, Peter Fitzgerald, lost his party support for re-election due to a corruption scandal. The strong frontrunner to succeed him was an investment banker named Jack Ryan. He handily won the party primary heading into 2004 and was strongly positioned to win the seat back for his party. As it happens, in 1991, Jack married an aspiring actress named Jerry Zimmerman. Because of the nature of their careers, Jack was based in Illinois and Jerry in California, which meant that their marriage was strained by prolonged absences and the need to travel back and forth between the states to see one another. In 1997, Jerry got a pretty big break. She was chosen for what was meant to be a small role on the struggling show Star Trek, Voyager, as the character 7 of 9. Well, after she joined the cast of Voyager, the ratings for the show went through the roof. Producers wanted her to stay on for a much larger role than was planned, and writers across the country were frothing at the mouth for a chance to write scripts for Jerry's character. This meant that Jerry and her husband, Jack, were forced to be apart from one another much more often. This made Jack very upset and quite jealous, and their marriage faltered even harder. The two divorced acrimoniously in 1999, and both decided that the records of the proceedings be sealed for the sake of their children. The Chicago Tribune and WLS-TV, the local ABC affiliate, thought these records ought to be released ahead of the election. And, in late March 2004, the Los Angeles Superior Court Judge Robert Schneider agreed, ruling that select portions of the Ryans' custody records should be unsealed. In them, Jerry alleged that Jack had pressured her to perform sexual acts with him in public in sex clubs in New York City, New Orleans, and Paris. These clubs were described as bizarre, with cages, whips and other apparatus hanging from the ceiling. Ryan's campaign activity ended a week later, and under party pressure, he officially withdrew his name from the race in July 2004. The GOP then randomly chose the Maryland diplomat Alan Keyes to replace Ryan on the ticket, an unknown person to most of Illinois. He was very unpopular and derided as a carpetbagging outsider. And so, what was meant to be a competitive race to maintain a Senate seat for the GOP in Illinois devolved into a total rout for the party, with a whopping 70.0% of the vote during the 2004 general election going to an obscure Democratic challenger. That challenger was named Barack Obama. Update: what's the best example of the butterfly effect? Ahead of the 2004 election year, the Republican senator from Illinois, Peter Fitzgerald, lost his party support for re-election due to a corruption scandal. The strong frontrunner to succeed him was an investment banker named Jack Ryan. He handily won the party primary heading into 2004 and was strongly positioned to win the seat back for his party. As it happens, in 1991, Jack married an aspiring actress named Jerry Zimmerman. Because of the nature of their careers, Jack was based in Illinois and Jerry in California, which meant that their marriage was strained by prolonged absences and the need to travel back and forth between the states to see one another. In 1997, Jerry got a pretty big break. She was chosen for what was meant to be a small role on the struggling show Star Trek, Voyager, as the character 7 of 9. Well, after she joined the cast of Voyager, the ratings for the show went through the roof. Producers wanted her to stay on for a much larger role than was planned, and writers across the country were frothing at the mouth for a chance to write scripts for Jerry's character. This meant that Jerry and her husband, Jack, were forced to be apart from one another much more often. This made Jack very upset and quite jealous, and their marriage faltered even harder. The two divorced acrimoniously in 1999, and both decided that the records of the proceedings be sealed for the sake of their children. The Chicago Tribune and WLS-TV, the local ABC affiliate, thought these records ought to be released ahead of the election. And, in late March 2004, the Los Angeles Superior Court Judge Robert Schneider agreed, ruling that select portions of the Ryans' custody records should be unsealed. In them, Jerry alleged that Jack had pressured her to perform sexual acts with him in public in sex clubs in New York City, New Orleans, and Paris. These clubs were described as bizarre, with cages, whips and other apparatus hanging from the ceiling. Ryan's campaign activity ended a week later, and under party pressure, he officially withdrew his name from the race in July 2004. The GOP then randomly chose the Maryland diplomat Alan Keyes to replace Ryan on the ticket, an unknown person to most of Illinois. He was very unpopular and derided as a carpetbagging outsider. And so, what was meant to be a competitive race to maintain a Senate seat for the GOP in Illinois devolved into a total rout for the party, with a whopping 70.0% of the vote during the 2004 general election going to an obscure Democratic challenger. That challenger was named Barack Obama.
My psycho sister-in-law wants custody of my daughter because she's infertile. I've been married to her brother for over 10 years and there's always been some jealousy and resentment from her. She's always felt like I had the life she wanted, not necessarily with her brother, but the marriage, family, and job stability. I have 3 kids, 3-month daughter. She got married last year and they decided to start trying for a baby, but she was unfortunately told that she couldn't have children naturally. She was understandably devastated and the family comforted her as best as we could. We recently had a family dinner and in the middle of it, she said, "I think it's unfair that you got to have 3 kids and I can't have any. Your baby is my last chance to raise a child, so I think you should give her to me during the week so I can create a motherly bond with her and you can have her on weekends." Before I could respond, the entire table erupted with everyone talking at once, so I took my older kids upstairs. When I returned to the dining room, her husband asked what the hell was wrong with her and why she would even think to ask that. She was trying to justify herself when I asked them to leave. I also said that she's no longer welcome at my house or around my children until she gets help. She started screaming that I didn't deserve my life or my children and that I stole her baby from her. Her husband and mother-in-law kept apologizing and dragged her out of the house, still crying and screaming. Now my kids want to know why their aunt wants to take the baby. I have not seen sister-in-law since the incident happened and I also blocked her on my socials. My in-laws have been amazing through this entire situation and are not sharing any information about our family with her. Unfortunately, she remains fixated on my baby. She tried to find out where the daycare is and even threatened to hurt herself if my in-laws didn't tell her. She wrote me a letter begging me to be fair and let her see her baby. Sister-in-law's husband is working with her psychiatrist to see how best she can be helped, but he has said he doesn't know how long he can deal with this, but he's giving it 6 months. It's a very sad situation for her and I had hoped she would be able to deal with whatever is happening. At this point, we're completely no contact with her. We explained to our older kids that their aunt isn't well, so she won't be around anymore.
I yelled at my mother-in-law for serving my pregnant wife raw fish, but my wife says I'm acting insane and racist. My wife is about 6 months pregnant with a little boy and we cannot be more excited. We've both been reading a bunch of parenting books and getting really excited for the new baby along with our families. Today, while I was working, my mother-in-law and my wife went shopping for baby clothes. They sent me selfies with some of the choices and I thought, oh, so sweet. I never thought that my mother-in-law would try to ruin my wife's pregnancy. My wife told me when they were finished shopping, mother-in-law was going to cook dinner for them. She had been craving something and mother-in-law was going to make it for her, and I should come have some too once I get off work. So everything seemed good. Honestly, I was just looking forward to spending some time with my family and have a home-cooked meal, which is always the best after a long day at work. When I got there though, I was horrified at what I saw. My mother-in-law had made poke bowls. For anyone who does not know what that is, it's a rice bowl with vegetables and raw fish. And everyone, including my wife, knows that a pregnant woman cannot have raw fish. Just like everyone knows that pregnant women can't have alcohol or cigarettes or caffeine or anything like that. When I came in, my wife was just eating happily and acting like nothing was wrong. But I couldn't help myself. I grabbed the food out of her hands. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I said. "Why are you trying to kill our baby?" My wife and mother-in-law looked so shocked and confused. My wife said, "Baby, what are you talking about?" And I just pointed at the raw tuna. Aside from having read all these parenting books which all say that you are not supposed to have raw tuna when you are pregnant, I am a nurse in a local clinic too, and I hear doctors all the time telling pregnant patients that they should avoid raw fish, specifically tuna, which was what my wife was having, because it has mercury levels that are unhealthy for the baby. I looked at my mother-in-law and said, "This is all your fault for giving her something she wants but she can't have," and my mother-in-law got mad right away. She said she couldn't believe I was treating the mother of my child this way and not letting her have what she wants. She said I must be stupider than I look. "We are Japanese. In our culture, people eat raw fish all the time even if they are pregnant. This is not some gas station fish like maybe you eat," she said to me, looking at me like I was some child. "Well, maybe people in your culture want to kill their babies or don't care about women," I snapped back at her. Maybe I went too far, but I know what I'm talking about because this stuff is not safe, and plus, who does she think she is talking to me like that in my house? My mother-in-law left, flipping me off, and I turned to my wife to ask if she was feeling okay after having eaten so much of the raw fish. But my wife said she couldn't believe I would talk to her mother like that, who was making a delicacy by hand. "My mom is right," she said, and tried to say that the mercury in the tuna isn't dangerous if it's high-quality tuna, and that I was being insane to act this way. I said I don't care if I seem insane because I'm just protecting my baby, and my wife said it was racist to think that Japanese people wanted to kill babies by eating raw fish. I want to support my wife's culture, but I just think she's wrong about this. Can mercury kill my baby? Has your boss ever shown up to your door? Yup, she did. 2 weeks prior, I delivered my forever sleeping little boy at full term. I was heartbroken and the world had stopped turning. All my footsteps felt heavier and everything I did was the most effort. She showed up one Tuesday just after 10 a.m. She had 2 cups of coffee and 2 donuts. I let her in and we sat in the living room with my dog and barely spoke. After half an hour, she headed back to the office after leaving me me with some leaflets about occupational health and my rights to time off work following the stillbirth. Nothing really happened. Next Tuesday, she's at my door again. 2 coffees, 2 donuts. She suggests we take the dog for a walk. We do. We chat about nothing in particular and the silences are plenty, but they don't feel awkward. Her visit lasted about an hour. When she left, I noticed she had left me some lunch in my fridge with a note telling me to eat it. It was appreciated. This Tuesday thing went on for 6 months. She missed maybe 2 or 3, but she turned up every week with a coffee in hand and no expectations of me. The silences got less and were filled with conversation. Sometimes we would talk about the birth and I'd cry. Getting emotional in front of her became less shameful. Sometimes we would just talk about nothing much. She made the transition back to work significantly easier. She became a friend and not just my manager. I will always be grateful for the time and effort she put into me when I was at my lowest. Am I the a-hole for telling my stepdaughter to go ask her real dad when she asked me to pay for her plane tickets? I married my wife Elise 12 years ago. She has a 16-year-old daughter, Anna, from her previous relationship, and we have a 7-year-old son as well. From pretty much the beginning of our relationship, Anna and I have never gotten along. I don't know how to emphasize that it is not because of a lack of trying. She just is not like me. When she was young, she was just scared of me and afraid I'd tear their family apart. Nowadays it's more of a neutral dislike rather than strong antipathy, so I suppose that's progress. Elise is a stay-at-home mother, so she relies on me for income. As a result, I pay for everything for Anna. Food, clothes, volleyball fees, field trips. I take an interest in her hobbies. I go to her games. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I try my damn hardest to be the stepfather I can. But it's so hard. Always giving me curt one-word responses. Always having to have an attitude. She does things to get a rise out of me. Staying out late reeking of booze. Always trying to sneak boys in. Typical rebellious stuff. But I always let her know I love her and I'm there for her in hopes of her shithead teenager phase passes. The opposite is true for her biological father. She adores him. Can't tell you why. He never goes to her games, always makes excuses for why he doesn't want to see her. He forgot her birthday last month and she cried herself to sleep. Well anyways, Friday, I came to her room to check her phone and read her messages. Not a permanent thing, but she's been caught sneaking out twice in the last month, so this is her punishment. I ask for the phone. She says no, I'm tired of you checking my shit, leave me alone. I tell her I'm not asking again and she goes, just fuck off already. You're not my real dad. You never have been. Stop acting like you can tell me what to do before getting up and slamming the door. Like I said guys, I'm tired. Tired of the blatant disrespect. Of being the verbal punching bag while still providing more for her than anyone else in her family. We haven't really talked since until this morning during breakfast. She asked if I could pay for her plane ticket so she could see her boyfriend cross state. Like I said, her mom doesn't work and her dad is a boss, so I normally would be the one to cough up the money. Not this time. I responded, go ask your real dad. I could tell she was hurt. Tears swelled up from her face and she excused herself from the table. My wife took me aside later and said my comment was extremely disrespectful. I said if anything's disrespectful, it's her treating me like a doormat and a credit card, and I will no longer tolerate this treatment in my house. I told her we don't have to be friends, but if she can't at least be cordial to me or respect my position as an authority figure, she can find someone else to pay for her non-essentials. Am I the a-hole? Am I the a-hole for charging my friends rent then keeping the money for myself? This will be my first year in college. When I got accepted, the first person I told was my uncle. We're very close because he took care of me when I was little because of my parents' crazy work schedules. Anyway, my grades were good enough to get me in but not enough to get me any scholarships. That means I'll have to take out loans for tuition and work for my expenses. When my uncle found out, he said I should just concentrate on school instead of working, but my dad, his brother, said that money is tight right now so my parents can't help me out as much as they want to. My uncle has investment properties all over the place, so he said it's not a big deal for him to buy another one near my campus, which he did. Then he had contractors renovate the house so emerging in there is brand new. He even had them install a bay window in the master bedroom just for me and I got to pick out everything else like the carpet and counters. He told me he wants me to concentrate on school and not work. Instead, I can be his landlady and rent out the other 3 bedrooms and keep that money to fund my expenses. I have a group of friends who are attending the same school, so I made a deal with them. Studio apartments are going between $900, $1,500, not including utilities, around the campus, with the expensive ones being closer. My uncle's house is 1 street over from campus, so I can literally walk to class every day. I'm charging my friends $700 per room, or if they double up, $350 per person per month, and split utilities evenly. They all jumped at the offer and no one asked any questions until recently when one of them asked me how much the overall rent was. I was honest and told them about my uncle and our deal. That blew up in my face because now every one of my friends are calling me greedy for charging them rent then pocketing the money. We're all in a huge fight and they all want to either pay nothing or throw a couple $100 in for utilities. I cried to my uncle, but he said now that I'm an adult, I need to make my own adult decision. He'll stand by my decision. I don't want to lose my friends, but I don't want to disappoint my family with bad grades either. I thought I was being fair with rent, but literally all of my friends are calling me a greedy
What is something you think all men could agree on? Big rock in water make big splash. If a man takes a hit to the nuts, we all feel it. All men know that when we go to urinate we have the silent or noisy mode. You don't ask questions when another man digs a hole, you either admire it and make encouraging comments, or you
Are your children allowed to go in the refrigerator whenever they want? Note, we raised an only child so it was just her, not siblings. I don't know if this would work with multiple kids. When my daughter was little, we kept pre-prep stuff, like cut fruit and veggies, in a drawer in the fridge and single-serve snacks in a specific bin in the pantry that was hers for the taking, anytime. Even in the middle of the night or right before dinner. It always had something. As she got older, the rules changed. Starting around 3rd grade, she was able to prepare her own fruit, veggies, and sandwiches. Snack food, i.e. chips and sweets and juice boxes, was portioned out by the week and stocked on Thursdays when I did my grocery run. If she ate all of the chips and sweets in a few days, there wouldn't be any for Wednesday. Bummer. She learned to space them out. At this age, she was cooking with microwave and toaster whenever in the stove when a parent was awake and in the room. Around age 12, she was responsible for adding her stuff to the list, not family food but what she ate as snacks and wanted for lunch. At first we prompted her, but we gradually stopped doing that until if it wasn't on the list, we didn't buy it. If what she put on the list was outside of the norm or huge amounts or crazy out of budget, we talked about it. At this age, we requested that she use the stove/oven only if an adult was home. At 15, we gave her a budget for her stuff alone, shampoo for her bathroom, snacks for her that we didn't eat, soda, fancy water, etc., and she had to shop for herself with the provided money, first with us right next to her. Then with us shopping somewhere in the store for household stuff. Then with us in the car. And once she was driving, she drove herself. She also shopped for and prepared one family meal, dinner or weekend breakfast, per week. Quite a few of our friends/family members said some of these things were harsh, especially when we started a new thing that she had to manage herself and was struggling a bit in the beginning. They said we forced her to grow up too fast. We felt that it was our job to teach her to do for herself, not to do everything for her. How would she learn if we did it all? We also believed in natural consequences. If you eat all of the sweets over the weekend and you don't have any Wednesday, that might be sad but you're not harmed. There's still meal food, so you might be missing sweets but you're not starving. It helped her to learn to regulate herself. And it's a real world thing, food is not unlimited. Anyway, we might be terrible parents, but when she moved into the dorms and later her own apartment, she already knew how to do those things. And that matters a lot. What was the most satisfying lie you caught someone in? Husband's car wouldn't go in reverse, so he took it to a local mechanic. I had been to that mechanic in the past with my car and he was trying to charge me for a $3,000 part/work that turned out to be a simple loose bolt. Phew. Glad I got a second opinion on that one. So, I didn't trust him, but my husband thought he'd be okay. Husband was without a car far longer than the time the mechanic had said, about a couple weeks. Mechanic kept telling the husband, should be tomorrow, 2 days, next week. Total run around. Finally I took my husband down there and the car wasn't there. I asked the mechanic where the car was. He didn't know. Huh? He said he had someone pick it up to fix it. I asked, who is the guy and where is the car? Somewhere in the neighboring town. That's all he knew. He said he didn't know how to get to that town, which I knew was a lie. Anyone who lived in the area, as long as I knew he had, would know how to get to that town. I asked, you let someone take our car, without telling us, and you don't know where it is? Are you serious? Husband was really upset, but I said let's go and we drove straight down to the police station. We shared the story and we were told that the mechanic was probably getting ready to sell the car because they'd had multiple complaints against him. An officer followed us back to the shop and asked the mechanic about the car. The officer got pretty much the same answers we did but told him he needed to have that car back in 24 hours or he'd be charged with auto theft. Next day, the husband got a call. The car was back and fixed at close to $4,000. Just a few days after picking it up, the original problem with the transmission happened again. We had the car towed to our home and I filed a complaint with small claims court for our money back plus court costs. The court date came and the mechanic actually showed up. That was a surprise. He came and talked to us and said he was selling property in California and would be able to pay us the money but not that day. We went with him to speak to the judge who told him he'd have a month to get the money and set a new court date. New court date came, and my husband got a call from him. The mechanic said his father passed away in California and he was out there so he wouldn't be in court. We went to court, told the judge what he told us, and the judge said he'd give him the benefit of the doubt and set a third court date. After leaving court, I dropped my husband off at work and, on the way home, went right to the mechanic's shop. He was standing outside smoking a cigarette. I turned around and drove in. He was nowhere to be found, but I asked one of the employees if he was there. Employee said yes, and went with me looking for him. I was not about to leave. He was hiding in the bathroom and I was going to stay there if it took all day and night. Finally he came out and I had my phone's video on. I told him I was so sorry to hear that his dad died, but I suspected the judge would be very interested in what I had to show him. Then I turned and walked to my car. He came running after me and said, meet me at the bank, I'll have your money. Which I did, and, he did. Run. Run. And if you can't run then walk, and if you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, don't stop. It's only been an hour since everyone on earth, as far as I could tell, heard those same words. I was already walking through the park when I heard them, and after seeing what happens, I won't be stopping anytime soon. It's been 2 hours now, I've kept walking, I'm tired but stopping is not an option. Some people tried driving, but the act of getting in a car requires stopping, even for the briefest moment, and as those already driving when they heard the rules soon found out, it's impossible to move indefinitely in a vehicle, especially in a crowded city. Their screams kept me moving. It's been 4 hours now, and I'm exhausted, with the only thing pushing me forward being the fear of what awaits when I stop. And yes, I mean when, proven by plenty of those around me, eventually I'll have to stop. Some have just given up, accepting their fate only to immediately regret the decision. Some just couldn't take the screams anymore, and most simply don't see the point of continuing. And with every step I'm starting to become more like the latter. It's been about 6 hours, and for the first time I saw what happens up close. I was walking aimlessly down an alley, trying to get away from the madness, when I saw a young man no more than 16 crying. It didn't even register at first to me until he made eye contact with me. He had stopped moving. His eyes were bloodshot, and not just whites around his pupils, I mean the entirety of his eyes were crimson red. Black tears streamed down his expressionless face, and then he smiled, a wide toothy smile that would have screamed of joy if it wasn't followed by animalistic screams that would give the biggest horror fanatic nightmares. I wish I could say witnessing his dying moments was the most horrific thing to happen to me today, but then it hit me, the realization that I had stopped moving.
I'm pregnant and craving bananas. My boyfriend refuses to buy them for me. I recently found out I was pregnant with my partner Lyle's baby. Lyle has ADHD, which he refuses to get treatment or medication for. He's pretty normal about 85% of the time, so I haven't really pushed it. One thing that really affects him though is sensory problems. He has a few, but the biggest one is bananas. He cannot stand the smell of a banana or the taste of a banana. He's accidentally eaten something with a banana before and ran to the bathroom like a child to throw it up. I once pranked him by putting bananas in his food and he was mad at me for a whole day for it. If we are somewhere and someone is eating a banana, he will claim that he can smell it in the room and make us move with the threat that he will get sick. If we don't move, he will start gagging, make himself throw up, and I've seen him start shaking too. This has happened in public before and it's extremely embarrassing. I was really tired, pregnant, and hormonal yesterday, and while I was watching my show I had a craving for a banana, which I normally avoid when around Lyle, but pregnancy cravings are just too strong to resist. He was going to get groceries from work, so I called and asked him to get me some bananas because I was having a craving. He started begging me before he even got them to not eat them in the house, and I just got fed up and told him no, that I was carrying around his child, and the least he could do about it since he's not the one having to nurture the damn thing in his stomach was get me a banana. I'd read online that this was probably the baby's way of telling me it's deficient in potassium, and that all I could really stand to eat at this point was the damn banana, and I don't want to deprive it of what it needs. He argued back and forth asking me to go eat it outside at least, and out of frustration I just started crying, which made me feel embarrassed. He finally gave in to calm me down and brought it home. I'll admit, I was still really mad and upset from our argument on the phone when he came home, and I at that moment couldn't face getting up and going to the kitchen. When he came into the living room and sat on the couch, I asked him to peel it, cut it, and bring it to me. I really didn't think that was a big deal, but he blew up at me and told me that I knew it made him sick to even smell or touch. I told him that plenty of people have foods they don't like, and he either needs to grow up or seek help for his illness because he's acting like a child and his problem with bananas is completely abnormal. We argued a bit more, and he finally got up, yelled that he was tired of my bullcrap, and left the house. He hasn't been back yet.
Confess to my crush. Feelings seem mutual, but can't gauge their seriousness. I decided to confess my feelings to my crush because they had been displaying affectionate behavior and kind gestures towards me. Their actions went beyond what one would do for a friend, so I took a chance and shared my emotions. In response, they told me that they think I'm a cool person and enjoy my company. However, despite the positive response, they didn't directly address their own feelings. I didn't specify if I wanted to pursue a relationship, so I didn't receive a clear answer. Both of us have introverted tendencies, though my crush can be quite loud in group settings. I'm seeking closure because I'm unsure if our feelings are mutual. The increased physical touch from them made me believe there could be something more. To further explore this, I asked them to hang out, essentially going on a date, and they agreed. We exchanged a few texts, but as someone new to dating, I'm uncertain about the frequency of our communication. I feel like I'm initiating everything and wonder if texting is the right mode of communication for us. Perhaps we both feel shy, but I can't help but feel like they don't care due to the lack of consistent communication. I can tell they have some level of interest in me, but I'm unsure of the specific reasons behind it. During our date, I plan on asking them if their feelings are serious and if they share the same level of interest as I do. I worry that their attraction might be based solely on enjoying attention or physical touch, or if they're simply looking for something casual. In the event they say they don't have romantic feelings for me, I'll feel led on because of the mixed signals. It will be difficult, but I'll have to move on. If they express that they do have feelings for me, I'll consider asking if they want to be in a relationship. However, there's a complication. I'll be moving away in a few months. I'm unsure if it's wise to pursue a relationship when the outcome is being separated by distance. I'm feeling a bit melancholic knowing that timing isn't on my side either. I could use some advice. Are there any other questions I should ask my crush? Do you have any questions for me? What would you do in my situation? How can I determine if they're right for me when we don't have frequent interactions? Men, how did you gain confidence? For the first 15 years of my life, people have avoided me like the plague because I was too ugly to be associated with. Anytime someone showed any interest in me, everyone at school would start teasing them and say that my weight was contagious. They even told my only friend to wear a plague mask around me if they didn't want to live a 600-pound life. Anytime I tried to go to the teachers for help, they would make it worse. One time I accidentally ate the entire class's snacks for a party and my math teacher spent 15 minutes yelling at me and telling me that Eric Cartman wouldn't even eat that much. Around that time, people were constantly talking about social media, so I tried to keep up with everyone by making a cool Instagram account. I took some pictures for my profile picture against my car, but every time I leaned against the car, a noticeable dent would appear. The only picture that looked alright was of me leaning against my car with several dents along its side. Everyone printed that photo out and put it all over the school. They would start threatening to call the cops on me whenever I went towards the parking lot because they were afraid I'd break their cars. I would always cry alone in my crappy car with an empty road ahead of me. I get that I had fat arms, flaps that hung over my belt, and had a face full of lard and acne, but I just wanted one person to be nice to me. I was all fat, no muscle, and I hated gym because I was constantly outmatched by every guy. I always came last. My breaking point was when it was graduation day and right after I got my diploma, I tripped on stage and sprained the ankle of the girl in front of me. All night everyone told me about how I ruined that girl's special day, but it was my special day too. I was invisible to every girl in high school up until graduation day. When I got to college I was still invisible, but one girl, just one, gave me a chance. She was looking to get back at her ex-boyfriend and lose her V card. I was available and she gave me a shot. It took a lot for her to get me hard, and we spent more time on that than we did doing anything else. After 15 minutes of her doing all her tricks, I was finally hard and she was ready. I couldn't go on top of her because I would have turned her into Flat Stanley, so she went on top of me. It felt fantastic, and the next thing I knew I was done in a minute. She was furious and said this wasn't worth it. She told me the only reason she got with me was so her ex-boyfriend would feel angry that she slept with a fat dude before he did, but she at least expected that I'd last at least 10 minutes. When I finally won, the universe spat in my face. That right there was my canon event, and I promised if something like this happened again I'd just eat myself to death. I hated my self-deprecation. I wanted to feel human again. So, I did the only thing I could do at this point. I went to the doctor to get a belly reduction surgery. I told the doctor all about the humiliation I had gone through, all because of my weight, and losing it now felt impossible. The doctor ran a couple tests on me, and by the end of my appointment he told me my testosterone was low for a man. That's why I had erectile dysfunction, no muscle mass, and since it slowed my metabolism it made it hard for me to lose weight. He decided that the surgery wasn't the best idea for me because my low testosterone would affect the recovery process, and my health would get worse. He even said that no matter how much I worked out, my weight would never decrease because of my low testosterone. I went home feeling disappointed that I was going to be trapped in my fat body for the rest of my life. I couldn't end it like this, so I tried something else. I have a friend who had a lot of muscles, had girls falling for him everywhere he walked, and was confident. He was everything I wished I could be, so I asked him how he was so fit. He said he used to have low testosterone and was a scrawny guy, but all that changed when he started taking base Shilajit because his testosterone levels shot through the roof, and it made it easier for him to gain muscle mass. I was hesitant because I didn't believe in any miracle supplements, but after taking base Shilajit for 2 weeks, I woke up with a hard-on for the first time. Guys always said they struggled with their morning wood, but mine was as limp as it could get, until now. I began hitting the gym as well because now that my testosterone levels were increasing I started feeling more motivated, and I knew that I had higher chances of losing weight. I was doing cardio and lots of chest and tricep workouts. I had never been more motivated to work out. In only 6 months, my face was slimmer and I could see my jawline for the first time since elementary school. My high level of testosterone made it easier to burn fat and gain muscle. My man breasts were clearly smaller and I stopped wearing hoodies to hide my bread loaf of a belly. I didn't avoid looking at myself in the mirror every morning anymore. Though the weight loss was incredible, the thing that surprised me the most was how much the base Shilajit made my peener harder. When my meat stood up straight it stood up taller than ever. It was so big it hurt to think about Addison Rae when I wore jeans. With that fixed, and my libido higher than ever, I finally became licensed and equipped to go to Pound Town. I was losing weight, so I went to buy new clothes because mine could fit Peter Griffin. When I was shopping I got my first ever taste of pretty privilege. When I was buying clothes at Aeropostale the goth cashier asked if I worked out and complimented my muscles. I was really confident, so I wore a compression shirt that day, which made my muscles look bigger. My muscles were proof that my testosterone had increased. After flirting she wrote her number on my receipt and left it in my bag. The girls kept looking at me that day, and it was because they actually liked what they saw. In 6 months I had turned from a pathetic sad loser to feeling like I could take on the world. A couple of days later a girl at Chick father-in-law called me cute and gave me a free cookie. Maybe I'll go back one of these days and see if I could eat her cookie. I didn't even feel scared about eating that cookie, like some people do after losing weight, because my testosterone levels were in order, so I was going to burn the calories either way. Later on, I was given extra scoops of Panda Express orange chicken by a girl. With my world changing around me, I never thought this was all possible. I finally felt handsome and other people were starting to recognize it too. Even though everything was opening up to me, all I could think about was the goth cashier, so I called her up. I took her out on a go-karting date and I finally faced my greatest enemy. I was prepared though. I knew that for a fact because my peener was functioning perfectly. My intimacy drive had improved, I got harder easier, and I could last a lot longer than I did with that last girl. My date took me back to her place and she told me to ruin her. I ripped off her clothes and I was finally on top and I didn't have to worry about squishing her. I lasted 40 minutes in bed. She finished 3 times and I had so much energy I humped her silly. I'm not sure if I want to be in a relationship yet though because there's other kitties out there for the taking. I made my grand return back to social media and started posting my weight loss in other subreddits and on Instagram. Everyone from high school couldn't believe my weight loss and how attractive I got. I was getting hundreds of likes on my posts and in my DMs I had a bunch of apologies from everyone in my graduating class. There were a handful of girls that wanted to meet up with me for coffee and others wanted to jump right to bed with me. The most unexpected surprise was the girl whose ankle I sprained during graduation. We're meeting up soon and I'm gonna press my foot down on her back when we get wicked. It was like I was living someone else's life. I was bigger and stronger than the fat boy I used to be. It was incredible. Had I known pretty privilege was this amazing, I would have been attractive years ago. Edit. So many of you have been asking what I did, so I'll lay it out simply. I took base Shilajit to increase my testosterone levels, and I followed Colin the creator's workout routines.
I just found out that my husband is having an affair with my high school bully. I just can't believe that he could fool me. His affair started 6 months ago. There were no sign. I just found out by accident 3 weeks ago when his phone was on the nightstand. My husband was sleeping with my high school bully. I grew up in a small town and this woman bullied me severely in middle and high school. I confided in my husband that this woman's bullying literally made me attempt to take my life. The only reason I am alive is because my parents come home early and found me on time. Knowing this, he still slept with her. After graduation I did everything to find a job in a bigger city and moved, leaving all the hurtful memories. I worked hard for a year, found an apartment, bought a car and later started college. That's where I met my husband. We got married 2 years ago. I'm 8 weeks pregnant now. He doesn't know yet. When I was in college my bully reached out to me after we bumped into each other at a party. She was new in town and was glad she saw a familiar face. She never acknowledged what she did and I never confronted her. I didn't want to open old wounds, however I wasn't going to befriend her so I just rebuffed any attempt of reconnecting. She still moved in the same crowd as my husband and me. 3 weeks ago, when my husband was in the shower he got a notification on Messenger. I thought it was odd since he's not been active on Facebook or Messenger in ages. We know each other's code so I looked and there was her name and pictures telling him she missed his PP. I scrolled a few messages back and there was a full conversation. Full pictures of everything from both parties involved. I felt sick and my eyes went blurry so I just left the phone back where it was and acted like nothing. Over the next 2 weeks I looked in his phone whenever I could. I found out that my husband deleted Messenger when he didn't use it, except for the time he forgot and I found it. I started doing the same. Whenever he's sleeping, playing games or out for a run I take his phone and install Messenger. I could trace back their relationship to 6 months ago. They've been sleeping together for 4. A lot of graphic descriptions of what they want to do or have done to each other but also a lot about me, although it was often one-sided. It's always my bully asking questions and trying to get answers about me, and my husband either reluctantly answering or outright telling her not to talk about me. But they've discussed my intimate life and apparently I'm a vanilla bean. To her constant questions about if he preferred me better in bed, he told her that she is way better. Discussions about me often ended in him getting irritated and stopping answering for days. I want to leave my husband but I don't want to tell him why. I don't want to give him or my bully the satisfaction of knowing that they hurt me. I just want to ask for divorce and just tell him that I wasn't in love with him anymore and that I'm not happy in our marriage. It won't be lying technically, because he's not the man I loved and I'm not happy in our marriage. I haven't told anyone what I found out but I've told my mom that I want to leave my husband and stated the reasons above. She went berserk.
My neglected daughter ruined my precious golden child's life and now she's thriving. How do I fix my family? My daughters stopped talking to each other over a man 3 years ago. I still don't know how to make things better. I will admit that I showed a great deal of favoritism towards my youngest Blair, 25, while growing up. It wasn't intentional and by the time I realized my mistake, my oldest Anna had grown so angry and resentful of her sister. My husband and I played a part in Anna's resentment and though we tried, Anna never let us get close to her. We spoiled Blair but we did try to do the best for Anna, but I can admit we fell short in some places. We had a few incidents where Blair knew she was more loved. Blair and her friends would often tease Anna. But on one occasion, she helped this boy who liked Anna to find a moment alone with her. This boy, an absolute filth of a human, forced himself on Anna. It was the worst experience of my life. When they returned home, both Blair and Anna were crying. Blair begged for forgiveness but Anna was hearing none of it. My husband and I tried to help her through it. Tried to explain how sorry Blair was and it wasn't her fault. How could she have known something so vile would happen? I tried and tried to talk to Anna. But she never gave us a chance. Anna hated her even more since then. When Blair came home from her first year of college, she had a boyfriend named John. It was her first love and Blair was so happy and excited. We were all happy for her, except for Anna. But she said nothing to anyone. Life went on until Blair came home crying and accused Anna of sleeping with John. My husband and I didn't want to believe it, but Anna happily admitted to doing it. Worse, she never told Blair. It was back in Blair's first holiday from college. Nearly 2 years ago when Anna had slept with John, she never confessed and willingly let Blair continue to fall in love, move in, and get attached to John. When we confronted her, she just said it wouldn't have hurt if Blair found out immediately. She hoped Blair found out only after John had proposed and even married her. After everything we and Blair put her through, she wasn't going to leave us happy. Blair was heartbroken and that night Anna left our house and never talked to us again. That was 3 years ago. Blair and John broke up and the heartbreak deeply affected Blair's studies. Recently, one of my sister's daughters showed me a post on Facebook. It was Anna. Apparently she was married and expecting her first child. The post sent Blair into a fit of rage. She kept cursing Anna and crying. It seems Anna had finished her studies, gotten a good job and married a good man and now was having a baby. Anna seems to have it all sorted out, but she won't let us in on her life. All while she purposely ruined Blair's and got away scot-free. This is what Blair thinks. I just want them to be friends. I want to talk to my daughter again. My daughters hate each other, all for a man who cared for neither. How do I fix my family? What have you done in your life that you don't tell anyone about? When I was 11, I witnessed my stepdad attack my mom. I was in my room and heard my mom yelling and screaming, so I left my room to see what happened. When I stepped into the hallway, I could see partly into the kitchen, and she was standing with her back up against the corner of the countertop with a terrible look on her face and a swelling cheek. My stepdad was about 5 feet away with 3 long bleeding scratches down his cheek from where she retaliated. His name was Todd, and he had started dating my mom a few years after my dad had passed. My dad served in the Gulf War, and had sadly lost his life overseas. It was hard on all of us, and now my mom had to raise us all by herself. It was just her, me and my sister in the house until she started dating Todd. She had dated other guys, but they had never moved in with us. Todd was terrible right from the start. It wasn't even like a replacing dad type of situation. He was emotionally abusive to my mother the whole time. They were always yelling at each other and getting into fights. It was a horrible situation to grow up in. When I saw him put his hands on her, that was the last straw. I guess I didn't know how to react, so I just turned around and went back to my room. That weekend, I spent Friday night at my best friend's house. I knew his older brother had a .38 Chief Special revolver in a hidden drawer he had built under his waterbed frame. Before I left, I stuffed the revolver into my rolled-up sleeping bag. I chickened out that first night, which was a Saturday, but Sunday night, around 3 a.m., I took the revolver into their room and woke him up by jamming it under his chin. He woke up immediately and kind of reactively had pulled his head back away from the barrel. I pushed it harder into his throat and said, "Don't ever hurt my mom again or I'll kill you." I don't remember if he said anything back to me. I do remember feeling like the world was spinning 1,000 miles per hour around me and that I was weightless. I don't remember anything after saying that to him until I was back in my room. I dropped the gun on the floor and bursted into the hardest sobbing I have ever experienced. Seemed like it lasted for hours. I don't know how long I actually cried, but when I finally stopped, I was drenched in sweat and tears down my entire front side. I put the revolver in my backpack, and snuck it back into that drawer under the waterbed 2 or 3 days later, the next time I was at my friend's house. Not a word was ever said about what I did by me or my stepdad, but as far as I know, he never touched my mom again. They divorced 3 or 4 years later. I ran into my friend's brother at a bar about 10 years later and I told him about borrowing his revolver, thinking he would just laugh it off as me telling drunk bar lies. He did not. He believed me completely, even stated that sometimes when I was at their house I would make little comments that his family understood to mean that my home life wasn't great. He's a big biker type guy, and he just grabbed me, pulling me off the bar stool, and hugged me for like 5 straight minutes. He was a great dude. Betrayed my girlfriend's trust, can it be regained? I'm a 22-year-old college student who recently went through a breakup with my girlfriend. Despite not always showing it, she brought brightness and stability to my life. We were best friends and spent most of our days together. However, our relationship became rocky in the past year. We would have good periods followed by small conflicts that escalated into N-word issues. We both made mistakes during these times, whether it was me not meeting her expectations or her getting overly upset and saying hurtful things. She expressed doubts about our compatibility but also claimed to love me. I take responsibility for many of our arguments, as I would beg her not to leave or block me whenever we had a disagreement. Although flawed, I loved her deeply. During the summer, I had an internship while she had a demanding lab, forcing us into a long-distance relationship for 3 months. We made an effort to see each other every weekend, but in August, things took a turn for the worse. She didn't want to talk to me and deemed me annoying, which hurt deeply. She would also get upset about seemingly minor issues that I didn't realize were adding up. In my free time, I played Valorant on my PC and met a girl in a group. We primarily interacted within the game, and she and some others added me on Discord. She showed me attention and kindness, and I made the mistake of engaging in conversation with her for a few weeks. No explicit photos or messages were exchanged, but she started sending flirtatious messages, like asking about my workouts. Deep down, I knew it was wrong but enjoyed the attention. Eventually, I stopped talking to her and deleted the messages, but I didn't block her. Unfortunately, my girlfriend discovered this and I deeply regret allowing it to happen. I feel immense self-hatred and have lost everything. My girlfriend has expressed that we can be friends but can never trust or be together again. I feel devastated. And have been trying everything, including begging and giving her gifts, to salvage the relationship, but the trust is irreparably broken. I understand that I need to let go and learn from this experience, but I still yearn to have her back. TLDR, I emotionally cheated on my girlfriend with someone I met in a game for a month, and now I've lost everything for someone who didn't matter to me. Teachers, what is something a student of yours has said that made you think, wow, there is no hope left for you? This happens almost every year. Mr. Bates, can I get a list of all of my missing assignments? Can I still do them and turn them in for credit? Inevitably, there's a student who simply won't do any work. They just don't care. They get chance after chance, and still they do nothing. They simply take up space in the classroom. Their attitude is usually a reflection of their parents' attitudes. The parents don't care, so the student doesn't care. There are 2 main types of public high schools in Chicago: selective ones that you have to test into, and the regular high schools that act as gang recruitment/dropout/teen pregnancy factories. Basically, if you don't test well to get into a good public high school, and you want any chance of a good life, your parents need to move to the suburbs or pay for a private school. Part of the selective enrollment process for high schools includes middle school grades. It's not just the enrollment test. You can ace the enrollment test and still not get in because your regular grades were bad. So when it comes time for high school placement, and the students and parents suddenly do care, they expect me to find and print months of missing assignments, and grade them all. No. That ship has sailed. I'm not stopping everything to help you with something I've been trying to help you with all along but you didn't care about until now. I also have students who act surprised with low grades on their report cards, when they've literally done zero work in my class. Mr. Bates, why do I have a 2100ths on my report card? Because you show up most days, and 20% of the grade is participation. I'm being generous and saying you participate just by existing in my class. You're welcome. My fat best friend wants me to gain weight so she doesn't feel insecure. Now she's mad that I don't want to. Me and my friend have been close for over 12 years. We met in middle school and have gone through everything together: high school, college, relationships, UPS, and downs. Throughout all of it, we have always stuck together. But now I might never be able to look at her the same again. For this story to make sense, I should probably note that my friend is on the larger side, weighing around 400 pounds. Whenever we go out in public, several people always look at her weirdly, and it really upsets her. One day, after we both finished work, the two of us went out to get drinks. Being quite attractive, it's not uncommon for guys to offer to buy me a drink. I usually politely decline, but today had been a long day of work, so I accepted the gesture. Instantly, it was clear that my friend was not happy. She began harassing the man, flirting with me, calling him fatphobic and rude. He hustled away, and she targeted her anger towards me. We had a long argument that night where she basically called me easily accessible and said guys only flirt with me because they know I'll entertain them. This upset me a lot. We had grown up together, and just because she was upset that nobody wanted to be with her, she thought it was okay to insult and degrade me. We ended up settling the argument that night, and I went to bed thinking that everything was over. I was so wrong. I woke up to a call from her at 8 a.m. saying she had to urgently meet with me in an hour. She called it an emergency. Regardless of the events from the night before, she was still my best friend, so I quickly got ready and met her at the location she sent. She seemed excited on the phone when we spoke, and as soon as she met me, she was ecstatic. It was like the previous night never happened. I asked her why she was so happy, and she told me she had a plan for the two of us to never get in an argument again. Understandably intrigued, I asked what the plan was, and that's when she laid it all out. She said that if I really think I'm more attractive than her, which I did say last night in the heat of the moment, then I should gain weight too. In her words, level the playing field. I thought she was joking, but I looked into her eyes and she was dead serious. I have a naturally slimmer build. I'm quite tall and have a fast metabolism, so I've been skinny my whole life. She knew this, but she insisted that it would bring us closer together. We could share more experiences and be more alike. I declined and told her how difficult it would be for me to gain the weight and that I simply just didn't want to. Then, in the heat of the moment, I suggested that if she cared so much, maybe she should just lose some weight. Not a good idea. She began screaming at the top of her lungs, calling me a fake friend and saying that I used her to boost my ego. Neither of these were true, but it was pointless to argue with her as she was clearly in denial. The two of us are no longer friends. What was the hottest inappropriate relations you've ever had? I am divorced, and the father of two outstanding young women. My youngest decided to join the army, so being a veteran myself, I was quite proud of her. Anyhow, I went down to see her off. I got a room at the hotel. They were keeping all the young kids heading off to the service as it would be easier to see her. On the night before MEPS and shipping, my ex-wife, oldest daughter and my youngest best friend and I hung out, had dinner, etc. It was a good time. The new recruits had a curfew, and my ex and daughter had a long drive home. Lindsay, the BFF, kind of hung back. She said she wasn't looking forward to the drive and said she wished she'd gotten a room. My room was a double queen, so I offered her to stay, figuring she'd say no. She said yes. So, we went to my room. Let me explain to you that, I was 45, she was 20 at the time. We were both single adults. But, she was my daughter's best friend. Anyhow, I hopped on my bed and turned on the TV. We chit-chatted a bit, and then she decided to take a shower. No big deal so far. So, she takes her shower and knocks around in the bathroom for a bit. Eventually she comes out wearing a towel. She stands in front of me, wraps her towel and climbs up on my bed and kind of kneels/squats at the foot. Then she starts touching herself. The girl was pretty, long brown hair, tall lean body. She's just staring at me, going at it. Then she says, "Show it to me." So I pull it out. It's hard as a rock. She crawls over and starts giving the gawk gawk. In no time I finish. She swallows, and then lays down next to me and says, "Now me." So I go down in her. I think she finished twice. She was so responsive and wet. It was insane. Finally, I came up for air. We banged. The next morning we went and saw my daughter off. We got some good and went back to my room. We went at it again. During a break in the action, we got to talking. She told me my ex-wife had said I eat vajayjay like a professional. I asked when and why she told her that. She told me it was after they had intercourse. Mind blown. So, I was having intercourse with my daughter's best friend who had been having a lesbian relationship with my ex-wife. Ex-boyfriend violates me and denies it. I ruin his life. I'll never forget the day I finally decided to take a stand against my ex-boyfriend, Ryan. He was a total jerk, But I was blinded by love and kept making excuses for his behavior. It wasn't until I was violated in the most heinous ways that I realized I had to take action. When I confronted him about it, he denied it, gaslighting me into questioning my own reality. I was done with being a victim, so I made it my mission to ruin his life. I started by gathering evidence, documenting every single instance of his sick behavior and building my case against him. Then I took it to the internet, sharing my story on every forum and social media platform. I bared my soul, leaving no detail untouched and no emotion unfelt. The response was overwhelming. People rallied behind me, flooding my inbox with messages of support and their own stories of survival. But I wanted Ryan to feel the repercussions of his actions, so I kept digging and uncovered more disturbing secrets from his past. I exposed him to his friends, family, and coworkers, unleashing a shitstorm of chaos upon his perfect little world. But just as I thought I had won, Ryan disappeared without a trace. It was as if he had never existed. I was left wondering if I truly got the justice I sought or if there was more to this twisted tale. That's when I received a mysterious package in the mail. Inside was a letter from Ryan, along with a key. The letter said that the key would lead me to answers and the truth I sought. I was stunned. Was this a trap or a chance to finally get closure? I was hesitant, but I knew I had to find out. I had to know the truth. So, I followed the clues, leading me to a secluded cabin in the woods. It was dark and eerie, but I had to keep going. I had to know what Ryan was hiding. I finally reached the cabin and opened the door. Inside, I found Ryan, along with a group of people I had never seen before. They were all dressed in black and had a sinister look in their eyes. I was scared, but I had to know what was going on. That's when Ryan stepped forward and told me the truth. He was part of a secret cult, and he had been using me to further their agenda. I was horrified. I had been so close to the truth, yet so far away. I was about to turn and run, but before I could, Ryan grabbed my arm and said, "You think you've ruined my life, but I'm about to ruin yours." That's when I heard a loud bang and felt a searing pain in my chest. I stumbled back, and the last thing I remember was Ryan's laughter echoing in my ears as I fell into darkness. So, there you have it, folks. My journey from victim to warrior, seeking vengeance and exposing a toxic ex. Sometimes, life throws you into the darkest of pits, but it's up to you to rise from the ashes and fight back. And remember, there's always more to the story than meets the eye.
I felt euphoric after 4 years. I have problems with recognizing emotions and feeling emotions overall. But there was one girl I have a crush on her for like 6 years, and when she looked at me first time 6 years ago, while we were talking she looked me in the eyes and it's like she looked at my soul. Not in a sexual but in a beautiful way. It made me feel such euphoria I have never felt after that. 4 days ago we were at a party together and she gave me the same exact look like 6 years ago. And it made me feel the same bomb of emotions. We decided to stay friends. It made my heart break a little, but the euphoria I felt made me feel alive again. So this is like a message of me thanking her. Love you.
People who worked for multimillionaires. What crazy things have you seen? I work as a maid for one of the wealthiest families in America, and they raise their kids like I've never seen before. During the interview process, I met the father, who's a well-known wealthy multi-hyphenate, and he started off by asking me a really weird question. Who do you serve? I was taken aback by this question because I came prepared with potential responses that would explain why I desperately needed this job. But I didn't know how to answer it, so I was just honest and responded with myself. He hired me on the spot and I started the next day. My major tasks for the day were to deep clean the washroom, prepare lunch and dinner, then pick up his son and daughter from high school and cook them dinner. I got my groceries, deep cleaned everything, started food prep, and waited for the kids at the school. This was when I noticed something was off. They're enrolled in public school. I met the children again, after briefly meeting them in the morning, and asked what extracurricular activities they needed me to drop them off to. I know for a fact that wealthy families always enroll their kids in spin classes, music lessons, and foreign language classes. I'd probably be tracked down if I revealed how much money goes into those classes. These parents usually make sure their kids receive an education you definitely can't afford. You can imagine my surprise when the wealthiest 16-year-olds in America told me, "We don't have any extracurriculars, we study at home." After eating dinner they disappeared into their rooms and stayed there the whole day. Before I left, I asked their father why he didn't enroll his kids in any extracurricular classes. In his fashion, all he told me was, "The school system sucks." Yeah, no, I wasn't buying it. Sure, the school system sucks, but he wouldn't send his kids there if it meant they were set up for failure. When I went to the mansion the next day, I was prepared to ask the kids what they did and if their father was negligent. I went to the son's room and he was just lying on his beanbag on his phone. All I could think was, who was I kidding? He's one of the richest kids in America, he can afford to waste his life away. Regardless, I asked what he was up to because I wanted to know what was so different about them than the other rich kids I took care of. He completely shocked me, because most kids that get into this give up after a month. He revealed to me that he was investing and trading stocks. I was like, oh, does your dad teach you that? He said no. He told me that his father doesn't believe in the school system. He believes that the most successful people are those who self-study, are true students, and put in their 10,000 hours. His father was so good at many things like music, computer science, and the arts because he was a dedicated learner. After talking with the kid, he showed me that he's been using an investing app to learn. Since elementary school, he has used programs like Duolingo to perfect his Spanish foundations and Coursera to study in his own time and collect certifications, but this is his latest obsession. He grinded the free lessons they gave, skipped the basics, and remarkably within 2 months he made his first profit of $270. The craziest part was his father didn't give him or his sister a dime, they worked for their own money. He saw that the app gave you free money when you invited people over and learned how to flip that. He showed his sister too, who's been learning how to invest in her school finance class, but wanted a leg up since she felt like she wasn't getting anything useful out of it. I've never seen a wealthy family like this, that's probably why I've stuck around with them for so long. It's my second year, and the son has gotten so good his portfolio has grown to have an average return of 11% a year. Imagine what he'll be making next year with that progress. They believe in being self-made, and that made me realize that's why their father asked me who I serve in the interview. I'm fully aware I'm a maid, but ultimately the only person I serve is myself, so it's my responsibility to invest in myself. I asked the son if he could give me some pointers from the investing app, but he told me, nah, the app has everything you'll need, just start. Edit, since everyone was asking, the app is Bloom, Learn to Invest.
Am I the jerk for telling my mom I don't give a damn about my autistic brother? My parents were very loving when I was a kid, but when I was 7 years old, my mom gave birth to my younger brother. I tried to love him, but I noticed that as soon as he came, my parents stopped paying that much attention to me. It got even worse when he was diagnosed with autism when he was 3 years old. Now, my dad is never home and my mom talks to me about once a day because she's so busy dealing with my brother's meltdowns. I've known my best friend Rachel since we were in kindergarten. Her mom is the nicest person I've ever met. Rachel and I played soccer, but my mom was rarely able to take me to practices and games, so Rachel's mom would always take me. I used to be in the school choir and my parents went to like one performance during the 6 years I did it. Rachel's mom was at every performance for me even though Rachel wasn't in choir. Those are just a few examples, but Rachel's mom has always been there for me when my parents weren't available. My mom never really cares what I'm doing unless she needs me to watch my brother, so I spend a lot of time at Rachel's house. Once I spent a whole weekend there and my mom didn't even call to ask where I am. Rachel's family go on a lot of vacations and they often take me. They're going to Disney World during Thanksgiving break and invited me to come with them. I asked my dad and he said I could go. They've already planned and booked everything and I'm really excited. I've been to Disneyland once with my family and it was horrible. My brother threw a huge tantrum on the first day because he wanted to go on the rides alone and sit between mom and dad, so I had to stay in the hotel most of the time. My brother found out that I'm going to Disney and he had a really big meltdown. He loves Disney and he was mad that I was going without him. My mom told me that she was planning to go to Washington to visit my grandparents. My dad didn't say anything about that, so I'm pretty sure she just made that up to stop me from going. And even if they are going, I don't want to. I don't want to go on a 14-hour car ride with my brother, and I'm pretty sure when we get there they're either going to make me stay with him while they go out or take him out and leave me alone in the hotel. I also wouldn't be allowed to go out on my own. She told me that I need to think about my brother and his feelings are more important because he's younger and autistic. I told her that I honestly don't give a F about my brother's feelings and I wish he was never born. He was there when I said all this and he's been crying and screaming for the last 3 hours and it's giving me a headache. My mom has been trying to calm him down and my dad said that he'll still let me go because he understands I'm frustrated. He also grew up with neurodivergent siblings, so he knows what it's like. My mom said that I'm a rude, ungrateful brat and I need to be kinder to my brother. Am I the jerk? What is a very sad truth you have made peace with? I've lost the ability to feel emotions. It's like parts of my brain have been paralyzed and I don't understand. My life is now a disassociated plane, it's not even beating its own drum. It's a flat line. People approach me with something personal expecting me to give them an empathetic or affectionate reaction, but I cannot naturally do that. I've now been outcasted by friend groups, social events, political issues, everything is crumbling. My wife has left me because of this and I do not blame her. I was not affectionate towards her, not because I did not love her. But because my brain could not process what love is. I do not love anyone and have long forgotten what it is like. She took our kids and I did not even argue this, as it is a lot better for them to live with their mother. I have not seen them in years and I do not know if I ever will. Frankly, I do not care. I have a therapist and psychiatrist and there's nothing more uncomfortable than people with over 20 years of medical and mental health experience getting quiet and losing confidence in how to handle my situation. I search the internet every day for people with my experience of what's happening. I search every day and can't find anything. But I've come to the conclusion that I will never feel the feeling of a cute puppy coming to my arms with such warmth. Or the butterflies I used to get when a pretty woman walked by. It will never be okay, but I've made an acceptance. Taste is my new form of positivity. I don't feel emotions. But I taste good things. I sit down with a plate of food and analyze the flavors, observe every detail. I make every meal count because it's the closest thing to a feeling of emotion I'm going to have. I'm not afraid of passing anymore because I'm at peace with my current hell. Most days I try to stay away from people that would make me want to take them with me. My life is not pretty, emotions are needed, my life is hell. I will live alone and pass alone, this is all my life will ever be and I am at peace with it. Today I effed up by ignoring my vegan host. My friend and I, both freshly 18 years old, had saved up for a few years to travel the world. We started with Canada, where we first stayed with my friend's cousins, to save on costs early on in the trip. One of the first things we were told by the wife, let's call her Linda, as she was driving us from the airport to her home, was that her husband was a hardcore vegan and we mustn't bring up the subject and must defiantly not ever eat or bring meat in the house, as it upsets him. Easy, no meat, how many meals need meat anyway, and we're only staying here for a month. My friend and I were both into fitness and got into a good exercise regime during our first weeks in Canada, walking, running, calisthenics, etc., which made us, naturally, very hungry. We were both also very aware that exercise is extremely benefited by a high amount of protein, and the only meals we had been eating mainly consisted of pasta, cheese and potatoes. So we were feeling a little malnutritioned and felt our hard work was going to waste, somewhat. One morning, our hosts told us they would be out for the whole day, which at first wouldn't make a difference to our day as we would likely be exploring the local area some more anyway. That afternoon my friend and I were on a stroll when I had the brilliant idea of, instead of having the usual cheesy pasta tonight, why not reward our bodies with some source of protein? The hosts were out so they would never suspect a thing anyway, and I'm sure even if they did, it wouldn't be an issue as there would be no trace of meat anywhere. My friend agreed and we went into the nearest supermarket and bought a few tins of tuna, to go into the cheesy pasta. We got back to the house and I made the meal, which really hit the spot and filled the gap we felt had been missing in our diet for the past couple of weeks. We washed up and went to chill around the house. Our hosts returned from their day out, my friend and I are sitting in the same dimmed room, relaxing. When all I see is a shadow in the doorway. Have you been consuming dead animal in my home? A stern voice said. How could he know? In made sure to clean everything meticulously. I panicked and my first instinct was to lie. No, I say calmly, starting to notice my heartbeat thumping in my ears. Then why does my home smell like corpses? I broke and said I added some tuna to our meal. He shook his head and stormed upstairs. I'd like to remind you at this point that we were two young, well-meaning lads trying to make a good impression on the world, who had undervalued some earlier advice, and this confrontation hit us harder than it would have now. My friend and I looked at each other shocked, not knowing what to do now. The husband wasn't the most approachable man at the best of times, less so when we've just broken his number one house rule. After about an hour of contemplating we went upstairs and nervously knocked on his bedroom door. My friend explained the situation for us, which at the time I thought was fair, as it's his family, despite him not knowing them that well, but now I know it should have been me, as it was my idea. The husband stayed pretty quiet, but his wife was also in the room, comforting him. We went to bed that night not knowing if we were to leave the next morning despite having not booked anywhere to stay for another 2 weeks. The next morning my friend and I were greeting with a piece of A4 paper that had been slid under our bedroom door. Confused, we went over to pick it up. It was a full-page letter from our host, in detail explaining the rules of staying at people's houses, how you should act and that your presence should be a gift in return for staying there, and that you should always, whether you agree with them or not, follow the rules of that household. At first we were relieved to see there was no mention of us having to leave. And of course, these are all wise words and I did eventually take them on, despite feeling somewhat rebellious at the time, towards such an authority other than my parents. We continued our travels for 8 months and came back to our home country of Scotland, more mature for it. The end. Parents who have disowned or genuinely stopped loving your child, what happened? I'm not a parent, I've never disowned a child. My parents disowned my oldest sister. I'm the youngest of 3 girls. My oldest sister had a horrible relationship with my father, blames me for getting in the way of their relationship. She had her first baby, to spite him, when she was 16 years old. My father refused to give her money because she met a deadbeat 27-year-old man, and got pregnant again, and again, and again. She constantly put herself and her man before the kids. Dad would send money to girls for Christmas and birthdays and never heard a thing. He finally gave up. She's 30, has 6 daughters, and lives in a mobile home in North Carolina. We hadn't seen or heard from my sister until June of this year. My oldest niece contacted me asking to come to Florida, where I live, for the summer to get her and her sisters out of the trailer. I agree, contact my sister and she agrees. I set up plane tickets and organize the rooms they'll stay in. When they got here, they were completely disheveled. Clothes visibly dirty, smelled foul, so covered in lice that my white towel stained gray from removing them. My niece informed me that they had been without water and electricity for 6 months. They live in a 2-bedroom mobile home, there are holes in the roof, bugs and rats everywhere. As a family, we decide the girls aren't going back to North Carolina. We tell my sister to come to my parents' house in Florida to get her life together and get back on her feet. She refused because her boyfriend was not invited. Ironically, she found out that he is cheating on her. She confronts him and he kicks her out of the trailer. Her boyfriend said, I would rather be homeless than live with you. Sister now works for the dollar store and doesn't pull her weight with kids. At least the girls are safe now. Try to harass my grandma, you might take back a nub. Setting early 60s, medium-sized Midwestern city, local neighborhood bar. The title of this story comes from my grandma's old saying. See, my grandma always carries a switchblade in her purse for protection and she said if anyone ever tried to attack her, they might get her but she's gonna take a piece of them, hence her term I'll take back a nub. My grandma was born in the deep south back in the 30s. She was one of 4 sisters who I will refer to for the rest of this as the 4 sisters. My family decided to migrate up to a northern Midwest city in the 50s. Just for clarification, my family is African American, so if you know anything about United States history, you would understand why they would want to escape the deep south during this time period. My grandma was 20-something when she moved north with her husband, my grandfather. The rest of her family, her sisters, mother, and uncle, also moved up north. Because of housing discrimination, my grandparents were forced to live in the black neighborhood. The rest of the family also lived in this neighborhood and were basically within walking distance of each other. The thing to know about the four sisters is that they were all Spitfires. They are some of the most caring women you can know and were all excellent mothers and grandmothers, but they were not to be trifled or messed with. If you crossed one of them, that might be your life. This was especially true of my grandmother, who was all of 5 feet 1 inch and fairly petite. The four sisters were quite the characters, and it didn't take the neighborhood long to know of these four sisters because of their crazy antics. They also loved hanging together on the weekends, either at one of their houses or sometimes at the local watering hole. On this particular night, my grandma wanted to go out for a few hours with her sisters. Only one could go, Aunt C. My uncle, my grandma's oldest son, was in charge of watching his siblings for a few hours on this lovely Saturday night as my grandma dressed to the nines and headed down about half a mile to the local bar to meet up with her sister. This was a pretty small bar that had a lot of regulars. My grandma has been there dozens of times and has plenty of stories to tell about her time there with her sisters and also with my grandfather. My grandma and Aunt C are lounging in the bar having a couple of drinks and cracking some jokes with some of the regulars when a new character is introduced to the scene. This guy's name is Leroy. He was a regular as well. To picture this guy, you want to think about a guy as skinny as Jimmy Walker, and about the height of Kevin Hart. Combine this and make him about the age of 40 and you'll have Leroy. Almost everyone will know Kevin Hart, but if you're not sure who Jimmy Walker is, look up the sitcom Good Times and you'll figure out who he is. Leroy was a regular at the bar too, but then again, Leroy was a regular at almost every bar in town. You see kids, before the internet, online dating apps and hookup sites, the way most people met was at bars. Our good friend Leroy was notorious for wanting to have a one-night rendezvous with the ladies at the bar. Well, everyone knew his game, and after he had had a few one-night stands with some of the ladies in the neighborhood, most now avoided him like the plague. This of course didn't stop him from going to bars on a weekend, trying his best to shoot his shot and hoping a lovely filly might come home with him for the night. Leroy had flirted with my grandma and aunt on previous occasions, and even though he was told that they were both happily married, he kept trying to have a conversation with them. As soon as he entered, he once again strolled over there trying to see if he could get some action with either of them. My grandma quickly told him not to waste his breath, but he sat down anyway. What surprised my grandma was that behind Leroy was another dude. He was well over 6 feet tall and handsome. My grandma honestly couldn't recall this guy's name, so we'll call him a Jerk. My grandma knew right away that this Billy D. Williams wannabe was going to try to sweet talk and charm his way into some ladies' pants that night. It seems that he had his sights set on his first target, which would be, of course, my grandmother and my Aunt C. It seems like our good friend Leroy was going to try to be a jerk wingman. He started off with some small talk to my grandma, who couldn't tell her how gorgeous she was, and something about getting lost with heater eyes and all the other nonsense. My grandma said that he had diarrhea of the mouth, and pretty much let what he said go on one ear and find the nearest exit. My grandma quickly shut this clown down and let it know she wasn't interested, so then he set his sights on my aunt. Now you know my aunt can take care of herself. My grandma was always a little protective of her. Jerk made a comment about how nice my aunt's thighs were as he looked lustfully at her. My grandma quickly told this fool that my aunt was married and not interested in his nonsense. This is where the story changes and revenge comes into place. I'm gonna try to write this dialogue as best as she recalls it. Grandma, she's not interested and she is happy married. Jerk, she can speak for herself. Jerk, your legs must be tired because you've been running through my mind all night. Yes, this fool used a pickup line. Grandma, are you hard of hearing or something, or a little slow? I told you she's married and not interested. Jerk, N-word, you talk too much. Maybe I'll put what's my pants down your throat. He actually said his dong, but not sure if I can use that word. Ladies and gentlemen, this is where crap got real. Yes, everybody else in the bar knew you wouldn't and shouldn't talk to my grandma that way. She didn't play for that nonsense. This is one of those times where you could actually hear a pin drop as everyone got quiet. My grandma exploded with a expected "What the hell did you just say?" My grandma was seething with anger, but Jerkface played off as it wasn't a good idea. My Aunt C knew it was about to go down. She grabbed my grandma and started leading to the door. You see, my sister knew what many other people knew, and that is my grandma kept a .38 snub-nose revolver in her purse and typically kept a very sharp switchblade wrapped up in her bra. My aunt tried to lead my grandma out of the bar to avoid any more confrontation, but my grandma wasn't having it. As she was being pushed out the door by my aunt and other male customers, my grandma seized a nearby beer glass and flung it towards the Jerk. Fortunately, glass didn't hit him and erupted close to his feet, but it certainly got his attention. This well over 200 pounds man jumped out of his chair, storms towards my grandma saying that he will kick her butt. My grandma replies, bringing on, bringing on. She eventually gets fully outside and he decides to come outside. He's a little apprehensive because a couple of the neighborhood bar dudes had gotten up to see this and he's afraid they might get involved, you know, since it's unacceptable for a man to hit a woman and all that jazz. The guys said they're not gonna do anything and just wanna watch. My grandma quickly pulled out the switchblade that she had in her bra, unwrapped it from the paper and looked him in the eyes and said, "Come on, mother ducker." You would think at this point any civilized person might be apologizing further for the crude language he used earlier, or you would think that the guy, seeing that my grandma had heels on, might just walk away knowing she's probably not gonna chase after them. Do you think this clown chose either option? If you said he chose neither option, you would be correct. Let's give you a prize, son. What a woman with a switchblade bearing down on him. He decides to stand his ground and doubles down by again calling my grandmother the N-word and telling her he's going to beat her. He next starts putting up his fist ready, it's ready to go to town. No worries, no one says my grandma has to fight fair, fight fair. You see, what this clown forgot about was my aunt. While Jerk has his fists up ready start striking like he is Mike Tyson, my aunt has conveniently took off one of her high heel shoes. She uses the heel to bash him right in the shoulder blades. Of course this staggers our young Jerk. As he turns looking at my aunt screaming obscenities, it gave my grandma time to come and slice this fool right in the side. As our young Jerk howls in pain, my grandma says to him maybe I should slice something else off. The Jerk staggered sideways looking at least two infuriated women, one with her high heel still in her hand and the other with a switchblade with the sight of his blood on it. Don't worry, he wasn't too badly hurt as she sliced him but didn't stab him. By this time a few other people are stepping in and are trying to calm the situation down and Jerk left the scene. The aftermath. My grandmother heard from others that the Jerk went to the hospital and got treatment for getting sliced on the side. This was the 60s, so no cops were called, and if they had been called, they probably would have been really slow getting to the scene. No idea what he told the hospital staff and doctors, but regardless he got patched up and was no worse to wear. Rumor has it that he ended up moving to Chicago a few months later. He never tried to get revenge on my grandma for this, so there's that. My grandma says she wasn't gonna tell my grandfather about what happened. He was an over-the-road trucker and was out of town when this event happened, but you know how things quickly go through the grapevine. He of course scolded her for this, but she just gave him a wicked smile and said that the butthole deserved it and that he came at her so it was self-defense anyway. Not sure that's exactly entirely true, but that's what she's sticking with. My grandma continued going to that bar every once in a while and was a bit of a legend. Our friend Leroy ended up being the epitome of a deadbeat dad. Rumor has it that he has something like 10 kids with 8 or 9 different women. My grandma still has the switchblade and yeah, she showed it to me. It's somewhere in her massive collection of items now, otherwise I'd attach a picture of it. I also learned that my grandma is a woman of her word because she actually took back a nub in the form of an ounce of flesh from this butthole. Hopefully you enjoyed this story about my grandma. She has told me the story a few times and was a little fuzzy on a couple of details, as she's in her 90s now, but I'll do my best to answer any questions. Family left me when they thought I wasn't my dad's son, but now they want to get back in touch. 4 years ago, Dad found out my mom had a lifelong affair, more than one, but that's another story. He knew about a couple of affairs she had in the past and forgave her, hanging in there for the kids, moving on, yada yada, but that time, 4 years ago, he found out me and my 2 siblings might not be his kids, considering time of affair. This was the first time we all heard of moms, well, everything really. There was a whole DNA thing and it turned out my siblings were my dad's, and I was not. Cool, right? So Dad leaves Mom, divorces her, moves out, takes both my siblings with him. Not me though, I stay behind with Mom, who hits a new low finding herself alone, and we both become pretty much outcasts as far as most of the family is concerned. My older brother was particularly mean to me. We were really tight before, and the crap he did to me, I swear, had I been bigger at the time, I would have punched him hard, more than once. I don't want to get into details because I can't since I could be recognized, but stuff happened and I got DNA again, and as it turns the heck out, DNA number 1 was messed up and I am my dad's kid. Now, I don't need legal advice on this. Grandpa is the man, always had my back, we got a lawyer and are looking to settle. But Dad wants back in my life. Brother is calling and wanting to meet up and talk crap. I don't want to. I want these people out of my life. Mom already forgave everyone, she is going on a date with my dad and I feel sick, but not my business, right? I wish them both good luck, but I want none of it. Only nobody leaves me be. I keep hearing that they're family, and I ought to hear them out and give them a chance or I'll regret it later, and that the only reason I won't talk to them is cause I'm a teen and stupid or some other crappy explanation. So, give me some perspective here, please. Do I sound unreasonable when I say, thanks, but hell no, thanks? What event made you grateful for your life? While back in rural Uganda for the second time, I was on a home visit for a potential orphan at an orphanage I helped build as part of a school project in collaboration with the local villagers of the village. This home visit took us to the top of a hill, where there was a tiny village with a really shoddy primary school that serves the children there. We were supposed to be interviewing 2 girls, aged 8 and 20. They were sisters. The 20-year-old came to us the day before begging for help from us. They were single orphans, their mother passed away last year due to sudden illness. She was begging for help as their father is a raging alcoholic who, presumably, abuses them. When we arrived at their tiny house, after being led there by their already drunk father, the 2 children were not home. The younger one was at school, while the older one ran away at the sound of her father's voice, as we came to realize the next day when she came back to the village I was staying at to be there with the 8-year-old for her interview. The house was in extreme disrepair. The kitchen was an empty mud hut that had no cooking utensils or any food at all. The house was dingy and dark, and there were obscene newspaper clippings pinned up on the living room wall. They had nothing at all, and what little money the father earned was put straight back into his alcoholic addiction. The only reason the 8-year-old is in school is that the school decided to support her by allowing her to attend for free. The 20-year-old told us that she ran because she was afraid that her father would abuse her again, as he usually does, and was unaware of our presence. What was sad was that the father didn't even know the younger girl's name, and their ages. He didn't even care about them and was drunk from day to night. It was then when I realized that I am so lucky to be who I am. I have 4 parents who love me very much. I can go to school every day without ever having to worry about school fees. I have a wide variety of clothes I can choose from, and I have food 3 times a day, and more if I'm hungry in between meals. I have a bed to sleep on each night that's clean and free of bugs, and despite all my blessings, I still took all of them for granted. I realized that the work I did and am doing not only affects their lives, it also affects mine, and that house visit was definitely one of the saddest things I have witnessed. People who lived in the 90s and earlier, instead of using a phone before going to bed, what did you do? Just sleep? I remember those days like they were yesterday. The 90s were a wild time, man. Back then, we didn't have smartphones to keep us up all night. Nope, we had to find other ways to occupy ourselves before we went to bed. And let me tell you, some of the poop we did was downright crazy. One time, I was feeling restless before bed, so I decided to take a walk in the sewers. Yeah, you heard that right. I went down into the effing sewers to clear my head, and let me tell you, it was an experience. The smell was foul, but something about the darkness and the dripping water was oddly calming. But that's not even the craziest thing I've done before bed. One time, I was so restless that I called up a buddy of mine for some late night antics. We ended up having a effing contend match in his backyard. I'm talking full on, balls to the wall physical combat. And you know what? It was effing exhilarating. I slept like a baby that night. And then there was the time that I got a touch job from a prostitute before bed. I won't go into too much detail, but let's just say it was a memorable experience. But hey, if you think that's twisted, wait till you hear this. One time, I was feeling really down and out. Nothing seemed to be going right in my life. And you know what I did? I went to a effing underground poor devil job factory. I know, it sounds effed up, but hear me out. Getting my dingling sucked by a bunch of random women really did wonders for my self-esteem. I felt like a king. So yeah, those were the kind of things we did before bed in the 90s. It was a wild time, man. And to be honest, part of me misses it. Life was simpler back then. But hey, at least now we can easily jerk off to adult films instead of having to go to shady strip clubs or prostitution rings. So there's that. What's your greatest I am so screwed moment? I nearly drowned, and had accepted my fate. About 5 to 6 high school friends of mine and I went to the river on one of the first warm days of spring. I wanted to prove I wasn't afraid of the cold water and jumped right in, swimming to the other side. When I reached the other side, the river was probably 40 feet wide or so. I was over 100 feet downstream. Then I saw that without thinking about it, I had jumped into rapids and miraculously made it across without so much as scraping a rock. I walked upstream to where the river was nice and calm, started to wade across, and reached a part where I couldn't reach the bottom. I got swept back into the rapids. I got sucked underwater and couldn't tell which way was up. Occasionally, after being tossed upside down and being slammed into rock after rock, I would hit the surface for a breath then get immediately sucked back under. After a while, it almost got peaceful. I fully accepted that eventually I'm gonna slam my head into a rock and drown. I almost completely forgot I was drowning and started thinking that I hope they find my body near here. I don't want it to wash up miles away. I popped back up out of the water and was able to grab the edge of a boulder for a couple seconds. I looked up and saw my friend standing there. I screamed help and got sucked back under, only to find a hold on another boulder a few feet down and was able to find some footing. My friends thought it was a joke, since I had disappeared from their view far upstream and popped up right in front of them. Then they got waist deep into the water, felt how strong it was, and noped right back out. Is my husband using his weekly poker nights as an excuse to meet his secret boyfriend? My husband, Jake, 35, and I, 33, have been married for 7 years, and I love him deeply. He's a surgeon, and on most Tuesday nights, he heads out for poker games with the boys, colleagues from the hospital. But lately, I've been noticing some odd behavior on his part that make me question the authenticity of these poker nights. It all started 6 months ago when I decided to surprise him with a packed dinner on one of his poker nights. Who doesn't love a homemade meal while they gamble? What I saw or rather didn't see when I got to his friend's house, where the poker games are supposedly held, was concerning. The lights were off, and there were no signs of any poker game happening. Jake was nowhere to be seen, and our common friends had no idea about any poker night. From that day, I began to keep track of his schedule more closely. I noticed that during these poker nights, he would turn off his cell phone, something he never does because of his profession. At their conclusion, he would often stagger home way past midnight, reeking of alcohol. He also started taking more care of his looks. He'd started working out, got a new haircut, and his wardrobe had become noticeably chic. One day, I decided to casually talk to him about it. But as soon as I mentioned it, he got overly defensive, even accusing me of being controlling. That was the first time in 7 years I had seen him react so aggressively. Jake had always been an open book. Why was he suddenly an impenetrable fortress? Odd, right? Now the kicker, as I was dusting our room, a guest receipt for a city boutique hotel fell out from Jake's jacket. The date on the receipt? Last Tuesday. The same Tuesday he was supposedly out at his poker game. What he was doing in a hotel while I was under the impression that he was playing cards is beyond me. Believe me, I don't want to assume the worst. But a chance encounter with one of Jake's colleagues at the grocery store made my heart drop. The colleague let slip that Jake had been spending a lot of time with his new resident, Tom. I admit I snooped on Tom's Facebook profile, only to find a picture of Jake and Tom at a fancy restaurant, dated Tuesday. These circumstances made me question my husband's loyalty. Could he be romantically involved with Tom? Is he using his so-called poker nights as a cover to meet Tom? My heart says no, but the evidence is stacking up against him. I'm in a dilemma because I don't want to confront him without being sure, nor do I want to break my marriage apart at a mere suspicion. I need help, advice, and if anyone has been in a similar situation, your inputs can lend me some courage. And please, serious feedback only. I am so lost right now.
My entitled mother wants me to quit school to look after my sister's children. So I snapped and said that she shouldn't have kids if she can't treat them all equally. I'm the youngest in my family with two older sisters, Emma and Vanessa. In general, I've always felt my sisters were raised differently than me. My mother will give them the newest clothes and toys, while I will have the things they grew tired of or clothes that are too small for them. They're only a year and 10 months apart, so they were only one grade apart in school and much closer than they were with me growing up. They always team up to bully me or do the housework because I am the youngest and therefore serve my oldest siblings. They got to do all the same activities together, hung out with the same friend groups, and got to travel together once they were both in college. However, I was just the little sister that they didn't want around growing up. For instance, I was literally kicked out of the house during Vanessa's 16th birthday because I was still in middle school and they thought it'd be weird if I was there at the party because according to her, I was still a kid. My mother then asked me to clean up their mess when the party was over. Anyway, my sisters got to do a lot of cool activities that I didn't get to do when I was growing up. They got to do ice skating, horseback riding lessons, and all these cool summer camps. Growing up, all I did was sit at their lessons and wait for them to be over. When my sisters left for college, my parents kind of checked out and didn't really care I was still in high school. They often tell me that they miss my sisters because they are sweeter and much better to be around than me. I was pretty much just doing everything on my own. When they got older, my dad bought Emma 3 cars, over the course of 5 years, and my mom bought Vanessa a car. When I was old enough to drive, my parents said they didn't have enough money to buy me a car, so I had to finance my first. My parents even helped them out with rent during college, car insurance, and any other expenses. However, I have been pretty much supporting myself since I was 17. Today, my sisters are both married with kids. Emma has 2 kids and Vanessa has 1. My mom looks after all the kids while my sisters are working. Meanwhile, I'm in grad school very far away from my family. Anyway, my mom has been complaining about how she can't handle watching 3 kids under the age of 2 at the same time and has been bugging me to quit school to come help out watching the kids, which pissed me off because it feels like it's just me revolving my life around my sisters again. She was also pointing out how Vanessa has saved up enough money to buy a house, which they don't see me doing at her age cause I haven't been saving as much as her. That's when I pretty much snapped and told her that maybe if they treated me equally as them financially, then perhaps I'd be buying a house at 27 as well. She started going on about how it was difficult raising 3 kids, and I told her that she shouldn't have 3 kids if she couldn't handle it and treat all 3 equally. My mom got really upset and hung up the phone and hasn't really reached out to me since.
Am I the a-hole for publicly humiliating my aunt for her bad parenting? My Aunt Kathy, fake name, posted on Facebook, complaining about something like challenge of the day, having an appointment in a medical clinic. Of course, everyone was worried and asked her what was going on. She replied that she was looking for an appointment with a pediatrician for her daughter Katie because her usual doctor was on vacation, and no one else was available. Kathy later gave an update that she found an appointment, and someone else asked, "Oh my God, is Katie sick?" Then Kathy answered, "Probably another urinary tract infection." When I saw that, I was really upset. Here's my reply to her, publicly, in the Facebook comments on her post. Honestly, I think you're not respecting your child's privacy by sharing such a personal moment on social media for everyone to see. I find this extremely disrespectful to her and her right to privacy. Only her parents and her doctor should know that information. Does she know you're sharing this with everyone? Did she give her permission beforehand? Is this for her benefit? How would Katie feel knowing that everyone on your Facebook knows she had a urinary tract infection? If you had a gynecological problem, would you post it on Facebook? Or is it just your children's privacy that doesn't deserve protection? In a few years, will Katie regret or be embarrassed that you shared this information on Facebook for everyone to see and know? Why tell everyone? Is it for the child's benefit or for your benefit, to get attention from others and have them say, "Oh, poor you can't find an appointment. Oh no, your daughter is sick?" To me, it shows poor judgment to share that with everyone. It's really none of our business. She then deleted the post and messaged me on Facebook, saying, "Hi, beautiful, I'm sorry. You're right, I didn't pay attention to it. I deleted my post, I didn't realize I mentioned it. It's really a big mistake on my part." I replied, "I've been thinking about it for a few days, and I wondered how she would feel if she knew you wrote that about her." Kathy then said, "You should have told me sooner. I really slipped up with that info. I just answered the question without thinking, and I'm sorry again. I would never want to harm anyone, especially not my children." I told her I didn't ask for apologies, and she said, "Have a nice day." How I found my unique learning style. So I'm one of those affable, semi but not really good looking dudes who's brainy enough to be in AP classes but not good academically enough to excel. I was struggling with history till about October. I've always been into engineering and forensics, so it's mostly been my elective. But thanks to this elective, I was able to land my best friend and amazing woman, the person I care about most in my life, my girlfriend. Details are irrelevant, but being a part of the history community, I still try to enjoy it, except I struggled. Cosmetically, I can tell you what an admiral's uniform looked in 1807, what a musket ball at 75 meters looks like, a quick biography of Francisco Pizarro, and even tell you the details of DC Sniper and Richard Angelo. But when it comes to anything past year 1900, I'm lost, and grades took a toll. So I started paying attention in class and doing my homework, a change from dodging homework and coasting from sophomore year till summer every year, but my overall average was still a C+. Fast forward a bit and I came up with an idea. The school divides up and clusters students who have similar academic needs, so I started talking to a kid in the advanced class that was struggling horribly and wanted to get help. Turns out his family moved to the area and a spike on the beginning of the year threw off his adaptability and academic integrity. He was dedicated, but his parents wouldn't let him get tutoring because they thought it would indicate they weren't good enough parents, and they also couldn't afford to keep footing the bill, which was supplemented by the school. He was very smart, just had a slow start and struggled to understand American history. And American history is the second or third priority in any high school curriculum. Dude saw the first indoor toilet the week before and didn't know the difference between the Roanoke Colony and Jamestown. He saw my grade average and asked for help. After seeing his dedication and academic integrity, I immediately agreed and dove in. It still took me a month or two of helping at lunchtime before I realized something. I'm a effing genius. My buddy couldn't read comprehend. I don't mean read fast and speed through books, I mean barely get the gist of the newspaper and make it a week without finishing a book. But he had amazing analytic thinking skills, so I quickly realized that I wasn't dumb. I just didn't have the cognitive skill to process specific information, at least not fast. Turned out I have a high aptitude for absorbing specific information through learning process, not as a passive absorption, but as an active learning. To put it broadly, I have a high aptitude for learning in a methodical, structured learning format, paper book, teacher, class notes and such, and absolutely horrendous in learning spontaneous and quick info. I convinced my girlfriend to tutor an hour to me 3 times a week on the bus, and after the first week I already went from a 61% on my section test to a 96%. She started tutoring an hour or 2 a week to another friend of mine who has a much slower comprehension rate, but his problem was grit. Before she switched me over to this friend, she graded my homework. Test grades are nice, but they're almost never a 100% accurate representation of learning. And boy, she was not kidding. I had mastered concepts a teacher hadn't even introduced yet. I remember on my paper on FDR and the New Deal, I described the Dust Bowl and how it led to the Depression in rural Oklahoma, a concept my teacher started teaching in October. I started with a C+ in history, and thanks to me learning to process information in a way that I'm best proficient in, I ended with an A in the class.
Nobody wants to go near me anymore. Nobody wants to go near me anymore. People used to like me. They'd sit next to me on a park bench. They'd smile when they saw me. They were completely comfortable bringing their girlfriends and kids around me. Not anymore. Not since that awful murder. Now they cross the street to avoid me, and if they do look at me, it's only with a look of disgust. I wish I could tell them all how sorry I was. Sure, nobody blames me. It's not my fault. They know it wasn't my fault. But now, they can't stand to even glance my way. I'm so lonely. God, what I wouldn't give to have someone sit down for lunch with me. I took the little things like that for granted for so long. I had to watch him die. They hanged him, and left before he was even dead. I was the one that saw the life leave his eyes, saw the pain and desperation on his face, and I couldn't do a thing to help him. Those terrified eyes will haunt me for the rest of my life. I wanted nothing more than to reach out and save him, point the police to the murderers, and see those awful men put in jail for the rest of their lives. But I couldn't. I'll never be able to. I can't control where my branches bend, and my leaves can only rustle and whisper in the wind.